Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Dar's Nights. I know many of you use these videos to relax or fall asleep, so before you drift off, leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get comfortable and begin. They called her the perfect daughter. 12 years old, quiet as snowfall, always clutching her sketchbook. Elizabeth Rainford never raised her voice, never broke a rule, and never left her small-town home in Connecticut without permission. But on a frozen January morning, she vanished, without a sound, without a trace, and without a single open door or broken window behind her. The police said it made no sense. Her room was locked from the inside. Her parents were asleep just down the hall. The security system hadn't been touched. And yet, Elizabeth was gone. What they found next chilled even the most seasoned detectives. Hidden under her bed, a box filled with disturbing sketches. Teens screaming in the woods. A faceless figure with burning white eyes. 2 murder scenes drawn in perfect detail, weeks before the victims were found. And in the margins of every drawing, one name. Written in different hands, different angles. Sometimes scratched into the paper. Sometimes dripping in red ink. One name, ASH. They thought she'd been kidnapped. But what if she wasn't the victim? What if she planned her own disappearance? What if Ash was real? And what if Elizabeth was never really alone, not even when she slept? Tonight, on Mr. Dar's Nights, we bring you a case that was buried under silence, hidden in suburbia, and soaked in the shadows of a child's imagination. This is The Silent Girl of Suburbia, the case of Elizabeth Rainford. Are you ready? Don't turn off the lights. Elizabeth Rainford disappeared on a Tuesday. Not just any Tuesday, but the kind that drapes itself in stillness, a heavy, brittle cold woven into every breath of wind, every shadow that stretched across the quiet cul-de-sac of Evergreen Lane. Snow had fallen steadily the night before, erasing footprints, muffling sounds, and sealing the world in a crisp white silence. The town woke to glassy roads, icy mailboxes, and one less child beneath the rooftops. It was her mother who discovered the absence first. At 6:47 a.m., she opened the door to Elizabeth's bedroom expecting to find her daughter still asleep, as always, curled up in the soft nest of flannel blankets she refused to part with even during summer months. But the bed was untouched. Pillows still fluffed. The blankets folded neatly. The kind of neatness that doesn't belong to a child. The kind of neatness that feels staged. Performed. The window was locked from the inside. No shattered glass. No pried frame. The door had been closed all night, according to the parents. Their dog, always alert to late-night movement, hadn't made a single sound. The alarm system showed nothing. No triggered sensors. No open doors. It was as if she had dissolved into the air, leaving behind only stillness and a hint of lavender from the sachets her mother stuffed into every drawer. The police arrived within the hour. Small-town officers in wool jackets, brushing snow off their boots, exchanging tired glances they hoped the parents wouldn't catch. They walked through the Rainford's house in that slow, deliberate way people do when they don't know what they're looking for. A missing girl in a locked room wasn't something their training covered. They took pictures of the room, trying to piece together a sequence that didn't exist. The only disruption was on the floor, 3 sheets of paper, scattered just beside the desk. The first showed a girl standing in front of a forest, her eyes hollowed out with thick, frantic pencil strokes. The second was of a figure in the woods, tall and thin, its limbs unnaturally long, stretching into the branches like veins. And the third, blank. Just white paper with faint pressure marks, like someone had started to draw and then thought better of it. Neighbors were questioned. Doors knocked. Security footage collected from the handful of homes that had doorbell cameras. Nothing. One camera, 2 houses down, did catch a flicker of movement just before 3 a.m. A figure walking slowly down the sidewalk in a nightgown. Barefoot. The camera caught the edge of the gown, the trailing of hair, a tiny foot stepping into snow without flinching. But the face, obscured. Glitching. Static swallowed it in the frame's center like a black hole. They combed the backyard. Searched the woods. Measured footprints in the snow but found none that could belong to Elizabeth. Just one strange indentation near the tree line, almost like something had knelt there. Wide. Deep. Uneven. It didn't match any human shape. Inside the house, officers took statements. The father, pale and shaking, kept checking his phone as if he expected her to text. The mother sat still on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly together, her knuckles turning white. When asked about Elizabeth's behavior, both parents insisted she'd been perfectly normal. No fights. No distress. She had been drawing the night before, they said, quietly, like always. She'd brushed her teeth, wished them good night, and closed her door with a soft click. That was it. The last moment anyone had truly seen her. There was no sign of struggle. No blood. No broken glass. No evidence that a 12-year-old girl had been taken from her room in the middle of the night. Only the drawings remained, and even they didn't quite belong. Her art teacher at school later confirmed the sketches weren't her usual style. The lines were harsher, more frantic. The subjects darker, more surreal. Her normal work was whimsical. Trees with faces. Floating animals. Gentle, dreamy things. These drawings were something else entirely. The media caught the story quickly. A child gone without a trace in a locked room, it was the kind of mystery that ignites wildfire speculation. The local news dubbed her the silent girl of suburbia. Some believed she ran away. Others whispered about cults, kidnappers, even supernatural explanations. Reddit threads bloomed with theories. Photos of her smiling face circulated on every platform, framed by the word missing in bold red letters. But while the world speculated, the Rainford house remained frozen in a state of uneasy waiting. The room untouched. The sheets undisturbed. And every night, her bedroom light turned on at exactly 3:17 a.m., despite the bulb being removed during investigation. Electricians found no faults. The circuit wasn't active. The switch was off. Yet the room continued to glow. The town began to shift after the first night. Not just in the obvious ways, flyers on telephone poles, search parties fanning out into frozen woods, reporters setting up camera tripods on street corners, but in something deeper, more instinctual. Parents locked windows they hadn't touched in years. Dogs barked more than usual. Children came home with questions their parents didn't want to answer. Elizabeth's name left a cold taste in the air whenever it was spoken, as though even saying it aloud disturbed something sleeping. The narrative constructed by the family and police felt too neat. A quiet girl disappears from her locked bedroom, no witnesses, no evidence, no sounds. But locked rooms do not empty themselves. Behind the crisp statements and televised pleas, a quieter story began to unravel, built not from facts but from what people chose to whisper after sundown. Elizabeth had always been different. That was the word people used. Not difficult. Not troubled. Different. Teachers remembered how she never raised her hand, how she turned in perfect homework but never spoke during class discussions. She didn't misbehave, but her presence unsettled people. She never made eye contact for long. She didn't smile when others did. Her drawings, even at a young age, made adults pause. They weren't violent or explicit, they were just wrong in some way no one could articulate. Her closest acquaintances, if they could be called that, said she had recently become obsessed with sleep. Not in the usual adolescent way. She had started keeping a log, noting her dreams, the time she fell asleep, the precise minute she woke up. She tracked the position of the moon. She wrote down strange phrases in spiral notebooks. Once, she told another student she was trying to break through. No one understood what she meant. After her disappearance, investigators searched her digital life. Social media profiles abandoned months ago. No real connections. Just lurker behavior, reading, watching, scrolling. But her browsing history was far from ordinary. She had frequented obscure forums about dream control, lucid states, and rituals. Threads written in broken grammar with usernames that looked like nonsense. Dozens of links saved, most of them already dead. What remained was deeply unsettling. Fragments of language repeated like mantras, references to entities without form, instructions that read more like invitations than guides. Her school-issued laptop had been wiped. Not professionally, but intentionally. Deleted files, cleared caches, overwritten histories. The last recovered document was titled simply, Doorway. Its contents were encrypted, but metadata showed it had been modified 3 minutes before her mother entered the room that morning and found her missing. 3 minutes. No longer than it takes to make tea. No shorter than the space between sleep and waking. The public clung to hope, as they always do in such cases. But behind closed doors, officers stopped expecting a return. Children who vanish without evidence rarely come back. The Rainford case joined the grim shelf of open files that collect dust while families slowly rot under the weight of not knowing. Still, patterns began to surface. An archivist in the next county recognized something. 37 years earlier, in a nearby town, another child vanished. Similar age. Similar family structure. A bedroom left untouched. Snow on the ground. No tracks. No witnesses. The case had been forgotten, buried beneath decades of newer tragedies. But the details were nearly identical. That boy had also been described as distant, artistic, quiet. He had also drawn a tall, faceless figure. He had also kept a dream journal. He had also whispered to someone no one else could see. The connection was dismissed publicly. Coincidence, they said. No one wanted to acknowledge patterns that hinted at something older than crime. But people began looking differently at their own children. At the drawings taped to refrigerators. At late-night mumblings from bedrooms across the hall. Everyone wanted to believe Elizabeth was taken. It was easier than believing she had gone somewhere willingly. By the end of the second week, the town was hollow. Search efforts dwindled. Cameras vanished. The Rainford family stopped answering the door. Lights remained off. Curtains stayed closed. Sometimes neighbors claimed to hear faint noises from Elizabeth's room, soft footsteps, the creak of her chair, even quiet humming. But no one investigated. Everyone pretended they hadn't heard. It was safer that way. And then, on the 15th night, something changed. At exactly 3:17 a.m., all the phones in the Rainford household lit up simultaneously. No calls. No messages. Just the screens illuminating at once, bright in the darkness, glowing without cause. When checked, the call logs were empty. The history was blank. The batteries, strangely, had drained to zero. The mother claimed she heard her daughter laughing. Just once. From inside the closet. A single burst of soft, breathy laughter. But when the door was opened, there was only silence. And that faint smell again, the lavender sachets, long since removed. A scent that didn't belong anymore. And from that moment forward, the town stopped speaking her name out loud. Not from grief. Not from fear of being rude. But from something deeper. A sense that names, once spoken, could be heard by things waiting in places just out of reach. The sketchbook was not listed in the original inventory of Elizabeth's belongings. It was found only during a second walkthrough of her bedroom, long after the initial search had gone cold. Tucked deep between the mattress and the wooden slats of her bed frame, it had been missed the first time around. The leather cover was cracked and dry, the edges worn like it had been handled more often than anything else she owned. The pages inside were thick, slightly yellowed, and warped from the pressure of dark, heavy ink. Every inch was filled. At first, it seemed like nothing more than the work of an unusually talented child. Imaginative, intense, maybe disturbed. But it quickly became clear the sketchbook was not just a place to draw. It was a document. A record. A method. The pages were filled with elaborate geometric patterns that looked at first like Art Deco designs but revealed symmetry too perfect to be accidental. Behind every pattern, there was something else, figures barely visible unless viewed from a distance, shapes that shifted depending on where the eye landed. Some pages were drawn entirely in pencil so faint the images only revealed themselves under UV light. Others were layered in thick ink so dark it bled through multiple sheets. Symbols repeated. A crooked X. A circle within a circle. A shape resembling an open mouth with no teeth. Each was annotated with cryptic notations, numbers, times, dates, coordinates. Some lines were in English, others in phonetic symbols that resembled no known language. A few phrases were clearly meant as instructions. 3 knocks in darkness. Salt at the corners. Hold your breath until it answers. The implication was undeniable. This was not art. It was ritual. The entries grew darker over time. Early sketches featured dreamlike landscapes, tall grass, bridges over black water, hollow trees. But later pages showed distorted faces, shadowy figures with limbs too long, eyes like holes, bodies that seemed to move as the viewer's perspective shifted. There was one recurring form in particular. Tall, thin, faceless. Always just at the edge of the image. Sometimes standing. Sometimes crouched. Sometimes suspended upside down, as though gravity did not apply. Annotations referred to this entity only as him. The pronoun was always capitalized. One page near the center of the book was marked with a crude drawing of Elizabeth herself, labeled SHE in trembling ink, and next to her, him, looming in the background. Above both figures was a phrase written in shaky, blood-colored strokes, "He sees what sleeps." The Rainfords were brought in to identify the book. Neither parent claimed to have seen it before. The father denied it entirely. The mother grew pale and silent. The family's attorney intervened, suggesting the images were an expression of anxiety or fictional horror, possibly tied to online creepypasta culture. But there was a weight to the drawings that defied explanation. This was not fiction. This was preparation. Further investigation revealed fibers embedded in the paper, human hair. Some pages had traces of ash. Others had salt crystals ground into the margins. A few had been lightly scorched, as though exposed to flame briefly before being snuffed out. Forensic analysis could not determine if the blood red ink used on several pages was synthetic or organic. The chemical profile was incomplete. The most disturbing part of the sketchbook, however, was not what it contained but what it predicted. Buried deep near the final third of the pages was a map. Not a map in the conventional sense, but a drawn layout of rooms, passages, and tunnels. At first assumed to be a fantasy structure, further inspection revealed that parts of it matched the layout of the Rainfords' home, specifically, the basement, though the Rainfords insisted their home had no basement. There was even a small note beneath the diagram, where the air bends. Investigators returned to the property. A thermal scan of the house revealed an air pocket beneath the floorboards of the laundry room. A crawlspace, sealed and hidden. When opened, the space appeared empty, just cold dirt, brick walls, and a low ceiling. But etched into the foundation were markings identical to the symbols in Elizabeth's book. Deep gouges in the stone. A ring of salt embedded into the dirt. In the center of the crawlspace lay a single black button, covered in dust. Next to it, a piece of string soaked in dried lavender. No signs of Elizabeth were found. No blood. No hair. No fingerprints. But the temperature in the space was 12 degrees lower than the rest of the house. And on the wall directly opposite the entrance, someone had scratched a series of numbers into the brick, repeating over and over, 317, 317, 317. The exact time Elizabeth's devices had powered on the night she disappeared. The sketchbook was bagged as evidence. But the officer who logged it into storage quit the following day. He wouldn't say why. His resignation letter consisted of one line. She's not lost. She's listening. The recordings began 2 weeks after the crawlspace discovery. At first, they were dismissed as routine static, background interference captured by the Rainford's newly installed home surveillance system. But upon closer inspection, the audio carried something far more complex. Between the hums and faint crackles were whispers, faint but rhythmic. They didn't match the voices of the household or anyone known to the family. And more disturbing still, they followed a pattern. Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., the whispers would rise just enough in volume to be distinguishable. Not clear, but consistent. A voice repeating what sounded like a single word. Again and again. The same syllables. Over and over. Down. Audio engineers were called in to analyze the frequency. They confirmed the voice was not generated by a glitch or loop. It was real, human, and most likely female. One expert suggested it could be Elizabeth's voice, strained and distorted by interference. Another dismissed that claim, insisting the cadence and vocal strain were impossible for a 12-year-old to replicate naturally. It wasn't until one engineer played the clip in reverse that the true message emerged. A chilling whisper, in Elizabeth's unmistakable voice, "He's under the house." The family was relocated. Forensics teams returned to the crawlspace and brought in ground-penetrating radar. Deeper beneath the original space was something they hadn't seen before, a second void, buried beneath the foundational slab. But reaching it required demolition of the home's lower structure, which the Rainfords initially refused. Legal battles erupted. Protesters appeared outside their home, some claiming the family had hidden Elizabeth. Others accused them of satanic rituals, fueled by rumors now rampant online. The house became a point of obsession. Teenagers dared one another to knock on the Rainford's door at 3:17 a.m. Online forums tracked every development with feverish speculation. And through it all, the voice in the recordings continued. Louder. Clearer. Now with new words. Phrases like "he's hungry" and "stop looking" began to surface. A month later, a fire broke out in the Rainford's attic. It was ruled electrical, but there were anomalies. No source of ignition was found. The circuit breaker was intact. Yet in the charred remains of the attic, carved into the blackened support beams, were more symbols, identical to those in Elizabeth's sketchbook. The fire appeared to have burned in a perfect circle, with everything outside it untouched. Inside the circle, the wooden boards were warped inward, as if melted toward a central point. The insurance company refused to cover the damages, citing the investigation's unusual circumstances. The Rainfords moved into a hotel. The home was left empty. Or so it seemed. Neighbors began reporting lights flickering in the windows. A low hum, like chanting, vibrating through the walls. One woman claimed she saw a figure pacing inside the upstairs hallway, tall, thin, faceless. Authorities responded, but the home was always vacant when they arrived. No footprints in the dust. No signs of forced entry. But the surveillance system continued recording, and every night at 3:17 a.m., the voice returned. Now with one new word added to the cycle, beneath. When the city finally granted permission to excavate, it was under intense public scrutiny. Teams arrived in hazmat suits, and excavation began beneath the original crawlspace. The earth was dense, the temperature colder than it should have been, and the deeper they dug, the more unnatural the space became. Tree roots coiled together in unnatural spirals. Stones arranged themselves into unnatural symmetry. After 9 feet of excavation, they found a door. Not a hatch or a hatchway, an actual wooden door, upright in the dirt, with no surrounding structure. Its frame was perfectly intact. It had no knob, only a ring of symbols burned into its surface. No hinges. Just standing there. Waiting. Cameras captured everything. A technician reached out to touch it. The footage cut out. All feeds went dark. Power across the block surged. The moment lasted 27 seconds before returning. When the video resumed, the door was gone. In its place was an empty void. Black. Depthless. The technician had collapsed and was later found unresponsive, mumbling fragments of language in tones no one could translate. Days later, he was committed to a psychiatric facility. The diagnosis was catatonic schizophrenia. But doctors could not explain the foreign glyphs carved into his palms, burned there with no sign of external trauma. The excavation was sealed. Officials cited risk of structural collapse. The home was condemned. Still, the whispers persisted. Even after the home was demolished. Even after the lot was cleared. Even when only the dirt remained, the voice continued. Every night at 3:17 a.m., neighbors claimed they could still hear it through the earth. And now, the words had changed again. He's not finished. The police reports from the surrounding precincts began to show an inexplicable rise in missing person cases, all eerily linked to the area around the Rainford property. Strangers who had no known connection to Elizabeth vanished without trace. Local law enforcement officers who investigated these disappearances reported feeling watched, suffocated by an overwhelming sense of dread whenever they neared the property line. Patrol logs noted distorted radio transmissions and unexplained static at exactly 3:17 a.m., a phenomenon dismissed by some as coincidence, yet too consistent to be ignored. Witness statements grew stranger with time. Residents reported shadowy figures lurking just beyond sight, glimpses of something tall and thin moving silently through backyards and alleyways. Pets refused to go near the old lot, growling at nothing. One elderly man swore he saw a faceless figure standing by his window at night, unmoving, before vanishing in a blink. No prints, no footprints, no evidence, just fear that thickened the air. Psychologists consulted on the case speculated that the entire neighborhood was experiencing a form of shared psychosis, a collective manifestation of trauma, loss, and fear seeded by the story of Elizabeth's disappearance. But those theories failed to explain the physical phenomena, the unexplained cold spots, the strange electromagnetic readings near the ground, or the recordings that continued to capture the whispers even after the house was destroyed. Local journalists who ventured to investigate found themselves pulled into the story deeper than anticipated. One reporter, noted for her skepticism, went missing after publishing a detailed article on Elizabeth's sketchbook and the symbols. Her last recorded message was found on her phone, a shaky video shot at the edge of the old property where she whispered about hearing a voice calling her name, promising the truth beneath. Her phone was discovered days later, abandoned near a storm drain with the battery dead and no sign of the reporter herself. Meanwhile, the Rainford family remained fractured and distant. The father withdrew from public life, speaking only in cryptic phrases during rare interviews. He insisted the truth was beyond human understanding, something ancient and relentless. The mother, racked by guilt and fear, sought refuge in silence, retreating to a remote cabin far from civilization. Elizabeth's older brother vanished as well, resurfacing months later with no memory of where he'd been or what had happened. Amid the growing chaos, a group of occult enthusiasts took an interest in the symbols and rituals found in Elizabeth's sketchbook. Some claimed the entity, him, was a forgotten god of shadows, others argued it was a demon trapped between worlds, feeding on fear and silence. They believed the sketches were a form of binding magic, Elizabeth's desperate attempt to contain or communicate with something that had latched onto her family. This group attempted to recreate the rituals documented in the book, hoping to break the cycle or summon the entity for answers. Their experiments, carried out in abandoned buildings and secluded woods, ended in inexplicable accidents, sudden collapses, fires, and members who disappeared without a trace. One survivor described hearing a voice, calling from beneath the earth, promising release if only the door would be opened. The survivor fled in terror, leaving behind a journal full of frantic warnings and symbols scrawled in blood. Law enforcement and local authorities grew more desperate as the phenomenon intensified. Attempts to fence off the area failed repeatedly. Surveillance cameras installed around the perimeter were destroyed overnight. Sensors designed to pick up electromagnetic anomalies malfunctioned or recorded incomprehensible data streams. Town meetings became heated as residents argued over what should be done: evacuate, destroy the site, or simply accept the presence of something beyond human understanding. The FBI was finally called in. They approached the case with cold pragmatism, deploying specialized teams to monitor the property with advanced technology. Their findings, however, deepened the mystery. Thermal imaging detected sudden, localized drops in temperature. Ground-penetrating radar showed shifting subterranean formations, tunnels that seemed to expand and contract, changing shape overnight. Audio equipment captured layered frequencies of voices, some pleading, others warning, and a few that whispered the same chilling words, "Don't open the door." Internal memos leaked later revealed a growing fear within the agency. Some agents believed the site was a nexus point for something supernatural, a thin place where the barrier between worlds was fractured. Others pushed for a more rational explanation, citing mass hysteria and natural phenomena. But all agreed on one unsettling fact: the longer the investigation continued, the more dangerous it became to those involved. In the midst of this escalating terror, a package arrived at the Rainford family's attorney's office. It contained only a single item, a piece of Elizabeth's sketchbook, torn from the middle, stained with a substance resembling dried blood. Alongside it was a note, written in the same shaky handwriting as the annotations, reading simply, "He waits beneath. The door will open soon." The note ignited a new wave of panic. Rumors spread that Elizabeth's disappearance was only the beginning, that whatever him was had been dormant, waiting for the right moment to break through. Local radio stations began receiving anonymous calls at 3:17 a.m., soft whispers and cries that terrified listeners but vanished before any response could be made. Then came the night when the power grid in the entire county failed for precisely 17 minutes, beginning at 3:17 a.m. Emergency services were overwhelmed by calls reporting strange lights in the sky, low-frequency vibrations shaking homes, and a shadowy figure seen standing atop the remains of the Rainford property, silhouetted against the moonlight. Attempts to capture the figure failed. By the time authorities arrived, it had disappeared without a trace. Scientists who studied the event were baffled. There was no natural explanation for the blackout, the electromagnetic surge, or the unusual atmospheric readings recorded during the outage. Some speculated it was connected to the disturbances in the underground tunnels. Others whispered it was a warning, the first sign of something far worse to come. The case of Elizabeth Rainford had become more than a missing child mystery. It had evolved into a puzzle of ancient symbols, unexplained phenomena, and an entity that defied logic and reason. The question haunting everyone involved was no longer if she would be found, but whether whatever had claimed her would be content, or if it was only beginning to hunger. The more experts tried to rationalize what was happening, the more the case defied explanation. The Rainford property, long demolished, had somehow become a locus for anomalies that challenged everything science understood about space and time. Investigators reported that time itself seemed distorted around the old site, watches stopped, digital clocks reset randomly, and witnesses described brief moments where seconds stretched into agonizing eternities or collapsed into flashes barely perceived. These temporal distortions were not localized. Reports trickled in from nearby towns describing similar phenomena, always centered around the same 3:17 a.m. mark. As the phenomenon expanded, so too did the urgency. Psychics and mediums invited by desperate families described the place as a thin veil between the living and the dead, a door not just literal, but metaphysical. The presence beneath the earth was no longer just a malevolent spirit or an unknown creature, it was an ancient consciousness that transcended human understanding. It was hungry, patient, and endlessly watching. Those who dared enter the surrounding woods at night came back changed. Some spoke of hearing a chorus of voices rising from beneath the soil, whispers that simultaneously beckoned and warned. Others described visions of a faceless figure draped in shadows, sometimes seen standing beside familiar faces from their pasts, urging them toward the depths below. These experiences were accompanied by physical symptoms, nausea, migraines, and intense cold that felt like it seeped into their bones. A few lost the ability to speak coherently, mumbling cryptic phrases in languages unknown even to linguists. Mental health professionals struggled to categorize the mass psychosis gripping the community, yet even they admitted the neurological effects were unlike anything seen before. Cases of dissociative identity disorder, hallucinations, and catatonia skyrocketed. Local hospitals reported an increase in admissions linked to trauma and unexplainable fear. Yet no matter how many sought help, none could shake the sensation of something watching just beyond the veil. Amid the chaos, a mysterious figure emerged. A man, known only as the Keeper, arrived in town claiming to have knowledge about the entity beneath the Rainford property. He was a scholar of ancient mythologies and forbidden texts, versed in arcane lore that most dismissed as superstition. He warned that the entity was not just a presence, it was a force that fed on silence and secrets, thriving in shadows and fractures of reality. According to the Keeper, the symbols found in Elizabeth's sketchbook were part of a ritualistic language, a key and a warning. They were remnants of an ancient covenant, a pact made centuries ago to trap or contain the entity beneath the earth. That covenant was breaking. The ritual was failing, and the door was weakening. If it opened fully, the entity would not remain bound to one place, it would spread, consuming not just the physical world, but minds and souls, erasing the boundary between life and death. The keeper's warnings were met with a mix of skepticism and fascination. Some sought him out as a source of salvation, others feared he was a charlatan exploiting the hysteria. But as unexplained phenomena grew, his knowledge seemed eerily prescient. He spoke of thresholds and portals, of ancient guardians who once kept the entity locked away. The Rainfords, he claimed, had inadvertently become custodians of that terrible secret, their daughter the unwitting key. The pressure mounted on authorities to act. The FBI convened emergency sessions to assess the keeper's claims, debating the feasibility of engaging with what they now described internally as a localized metaphysical hazard. Special teams trained in psychological operations and paranormal investigation were assembled, an unprecedented blending of disciplines. Their mission was to monitor, contain, and if possible, reseal the fissure threatening to rupture beneath the town. Simultaneously, cryptologists analyzed Elizabeth's sketches and the strange carvings found in the remains of the attic fire. They confirmed the symbols formed part of an ancient alphabet, proto-cuneiform mixed with unknown glyphs. Translation efforts suggested the writings were prayers, warnings, and incantations meant to hold the entity in place, but also contained pleas for mercy, as if the entity was once a deity wronged and trapped by its own power. The team theorized that Elizabeth's drawings might have been an attempt to communicate with the entity, or to appeal to a dormant part of it that still retained some humanity or reason. But the deeper they dug, the more fragmented the picture became. The entity was not wholly malevolent in the traditional sense. It was a force of nature, an intelligence born from the void between worlds, indifferent to human concepts of good and evil but dangerous nonetheless. During one late-night session reviewing audio recordings, technicians noticed a new pattern emerging beneath the static and whispers. A faint heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, steady. It pulsed in rhythm with the electrical disturbances recorded in the area. When amplified, the heartbeat was accompanied by low-frequency chants in a voice older than any language known to mankind. The chants seemed to beckon, promising release and transformation. A consensus grew among experts that the entity was attempting to communicate, perhaps even negotiate. But the question remained, what did it want? And what would happen if the door finally opened? Then, reports came from beyond the immediate vicinity. Other towns miles away reported similar phenomena, electrical disturbances, whispers, strange shadows, and an inexplicable dread at precisely 3:17 a.m. The phenomenon was no longer localized. It was spreading. In the midst of this expanding terror, the Rainford family's attorney received an anonymous letter. It contained no return address, only a single phrase scrawled in shaky handwriting: "The door is never truly closed." The whispers had grown louder, threading through the fabric of the town like a cold, invasive wind. No one who heard them remained untouched, they clung to the mind, impossible to shake, echoing long after the voices had faded. The recordings captured by investigators revealed new, haunting phrases, words that seemed to twist and curl into shapes unrecognizable, yet somehow understood. Listeners felt a creeping compulsion, a tug toward places best left alone. The deeper these voices penetrated the community, the more fractures appeared in the collective psyche. As nights passed, the temporal distortions intensified. Clocks sped forward unpredictably or stuttered to a halt. Digital devices malfunctioned en masse, plunging the town into technological darkness at times when the whispers reached their peak intensity. Electric grids flickered erratically, casting long shadows that seemed to pulse and writhe independently of their sources. People reported glimpses of the faceless figure in reflections, glimpses that disappeared whenever looked at directly, but left an undeniable sense of being observed. Even animals reacted violently, barking or fleeing at the mere suggestion of the entity's presence. The psychological toll mounted. Increasing numbers of residents sought refuge in therapy, emergency rooms, or spiritual counseling. Yet no treatment worked to alleviate the pervasive dread. Children drew pictures of shadowy beings with hollow eyes and mouths that whispered secrets no one dared repeat. Night terrors and sleep paralysis plagued the community, leaving a pervasive exhaustion that blurred the lines between waking and dreaming. The local school counselor described an unprecedented spike in anxiety and fear-based disorders, warning that the entire town teetered on the edge of collective collapse. The entity's influence seemed to infiltrate even the dreams of those affected. Recurring nightmares told of dark corridors that stretched endlessly beneath the earth, lined with doors that whispered promises of escape or destruction. Dreamers found themselves chased by something unseen yet palpably present, their breath quickening in the dark as unseen hands brushed coldly against their skin. Some awoke unable to move, trapped in the grip of paralysis, while others claimed to hear faint chanting carried on the night wind. Meanwhile, the keeper intensified his efforts to understand and combat the entity. He delved into forbidden archives, tracing the origins of the ancient symbols back through obscure texts and lost histories. His research uncovered references to a primordial being known in several cultures by different names, a shadow deity who fed on silence and the void between worlds. This entity, once worshipped and feared, was bound long ago by ritual to prevent it from slipping into the realm of the living. The signs indicated that the Rainford property was situated at a convergence point, a breach in the veil that had been weakened over centuries. According to the keeper, the entity's hunger was not merely for life but for the erasure of memory and identity. It sought to consume the very essence of being, dissolving boundaries between self and other, past and present. The disappearance of Elizabeth Rainford was just the beginning. The entity's reach was expanding, eroding the foundations of reality itself. Scientists monitoring the area noted unprecedented fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, coinciding with the entity's rising activity. Instruments recorded patterns that resembled neural activity but on a scale far beyond human comprehension. Some hypothesized that the entity was a sentient force, capable of manipulating the very fabric of spacetime. Others feared it was a contagion, a psychic virus spreading through the population, twisting perceptions and realities. Community leaders grappled with the dilemma of how to respond. Evacuation was considered but dismissed due to the sheer scale of the affected area and the unpredictable nature of the phenomenon. Instead, a curfew was imposed, with residents urged to remain indoors during the peak hours of disturbance around 3:17 a.m. Churches and community centers held vigils and prayers, though many felt powerless against a force that defied conventional understanding. Amidst this growing despair, a series of strange occurrences suggested the entity was testing its limits. Reports emerged of objects moving inexplicably, doors locking and unlocking on their own, and fleeting shadows darting just beyond the edge of vision. One family found their entire home filled with a chilling cold that defied explanation, while another described hearing footsteps ascending a staircase that no longer existed. The boundaries between reality and nightmare were dissolving. The Rainford family's attorney received a second letter, this time with a drawing of the enigmatic symbol found in Elizabeth's sketchbook. The message was chilling: "He watches through the cracks. The door will not hold." The FBI intensified their surveillance and research, coordinating with local authorities and independent experts. Yet with every discovery came deeper confusion and fear. The entity's presence seemed to resist analysis, slipping through scientific frameworks like smoke through fingers. Those closest to the investigation reported physical and psychological symptoms, headaches, dizziness, insomnia, and a growing obsession with the case that bordered on compulsion. In a desperate bid to understand, the keeper proposed a ritual, a reenactment of the ancient binding ceremony that had once contained the entity. However, he warned that such an act carried immense risk. Failure could accelerate the entity's release, while success required a purity of intent and sacrifice few were prepared to offer. The community faced a choice: confront the darkness with ancient rites or resign themselves to an uncertain fate. As the days dwindled toward a critical moment, the whispers reached a crescendo. The entity's voice echoed through the town, no longer hidden beneath static but clear and commanding. It promised liberation and oblivion, a release from pain and fear that was both seductive and terrifying. The final confrontation loomed, a battle not just for a missing girl but for the very soul of the town. The atmosphere in the town grew thick with tension, as if the very air held its breath, waiting for an inevitable rupture. Every attempt to suppress the growing force beneath the earth only seemed to feed it, making the entity stronger, more assertive. Unseen but omnipresent, it infiltrated homes, minds, and dreams, threading its influence through the lives of those caught in its expanding web. The lines between reality and hallucination blurred, leaving the community adrift in a sea of fear and uncertainty. Scientific efforts intensified, with equipment set up around the perimeter of the original Rainford property. Devices sensitive to electromagnetic fields, radiation, and sound captured data continuously, but the readings defied logical interpretation. Patterns emerged that resembled a language, a code embedded in the static, pulsing through the electrical noise. Linguists and cryptographers worked tirelessly, struggling to decipher the entity's communication, but the symbols seemed alive, shifting and changing in ways that made translation nearly impossible. The keeper, consumed by his mission, worked alongside these experts, providing insights drawn from ancient texts. He spoke of a cycle, an ancient rhythm binding the entity to the mortal realm, a pulse that echoed through generations. The entity's presence was tethered to this cycle, which was now accelerating toward its climax. Each day brought new signs: worsening temporal distortions, increased psychic disturbances, and the spread of inexplicable phenomena into neighboring towns. The breach was widening, threatening to consume a far larger area than initially feared. Reports of disappearances grew more frequent. People vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the faintest residue of their existence, a photograph left face down, a whisper of a name on the wind. The town's population was shrinking, not just physically but psychologically. Survivors spoke of an overwhelming compulsion to leave, as if an invisible hand was pushing them away from the epicenter of the disturbance. In the midst of this turmoil, an underground network of believers and skeptics formed, united by desperation. They called themselves the Watchers, ordinary citizens who took it upon themselves to monitor the phenomena, document occurrences, and share information in the hope of finding a solution. The Watchers risked exposure to the entity's influence, often returning from their vigil with fractured memories and a haunted demeanor. Their presence was a small beacon in the encroaching darkness. Meanwhile, the town's leadership faced mounting pressure. Public officials wrestled with the impossibility of evacuating a populace gripped by fear and paralyzed by uncertainty. The local police force was stretched thin, dealing with rising crime born of desperation and panic. Communication networks faltered intermittently, leaving isolated pockets of the community cut off during critical moments. The entire infrastructure groaned under the strain, a fragile shell barely holding together. The keeper proposed a radical plan, a collective ritual involving the community, designed to reinforce the ancient binding and restore the veil. This would require gathering at the original site at the precise moment of peak disturbance, synchronizing the intentions and actions of those present to form a psychic barrier. However, convincing the frightened and fragmented town to participate was a monumental challenge. Fear bred mistrust. Some saw the ritual as superstition, others as a trap set by the entity itself. Complicating matters, a faction emerged within the town, individuals who believed the entity was a force of liberation rather than destruction. They saw the spreading influence as an opportunity to transcend mortal limits, to merge with the primordial darkness and escape the confines of physical existence. This cult, small but vocal, clashed with the Watchers and local authorities, fueling paranoia and division. Their gatherings were clandestine, marked by chanting and symbols eerily similar to those found in Elizabeth's sketches. As the date of the proposed ritual approached, the entity's manifestations became more aggressive. Structures trembled, windows shattered without cause, and chilling howls echoed through the night. The faceless figure appeared more frequently, its presence a constant reminder of the stakes. Those who looked upon it felt an unbearable weight, as if their very souls were being measured and found wanting. In this charged environment, a breakthrough occurred. The cryptographers finally deciphered a fragment of the entity's code, a plea masked as a threat. It revealed that the entity was aware of the ritual and its purpose. The entity called it a futile attempt to bind what was eternal, warning that resistance only prolonged suffering. Yet embedded within this message was a faint glimmer of hope, a suggestion that the entity's hold was not absolute, that a breach in its consciousness could be exploited. The keeper seized upon this, rallying the Watchers and community leaders to prepare. He warned that the ritual would demand immense sacrifice and unwavering focus. Any doubt or discord could unravel the fragile psychic barrier and unleash consequences beyond imagination. The final night loomed like a storm on the horizon, promising confrontation and resolution. Throughout the town, preparations took shape. Families gathered in whispered prayer or silent dread. The Watchers disseminated instructions and safeguards. Authorities coordinated logistics and security, hoping to maintain order amid the mounting chaos. As darkness fell on the eve of the ritual, a palpable stillness descended, an eerie calm before the coming storm. And beneath the earth, in the fractured depths where light dared not tread, the entity waited. Patient, eternal, its heartbeat pulsing in rhythm with the approaching moment of reckoning. The door between worlds stood ajar, trembling on the brink of opening, threatening to unleash a force that could consume not just a town, but the very fabric of reality itself. The night of the ritual arrived with a weight that pressed on every breath and every heartbeat. The town was cloaked in unnatural silence, as if the very wind held back its voice, unwilling to disturb what was coming. People gathered in hesitant clusters, their faces pale and strained, eyes reflecting a mixture of fear, hope, and exhaustion. The air was thick with anticipation, as the line between the known world and the abyss grew perilously thin. The Watchers moved with purpose, guiding the crowd to the site that had become the epicenter of the supernatural storm, the ruins of the Rainford estate. The ground beneath their feet thrummed with a low vibration, a pulse that seemed to synchronize with the collective anxiety of those present. Electrical devices had been forbidden, the light from lanterns and candles casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits. The ancient symbols, painstakingly recreated from the keeper's research and Elizabeth's sketches, were etched into the soil, forming a protective circle meant to contain and contain only. The entity's presence was palpable, no longer hidden beneath subtle disturbances but fully manifested in the charged atmosphere. Whispers curled around the edges of hearing, incomprehensible yet unmistakably alive. The air grew colder with each passing minute, chilling bones and hearts alike. Those who dared to close their eyes reported seeing flashes of a faceless figure standing just beyond the circle, its form wavering like smoke, beckoning with silent menace. As the ritual commenced, voices rose in unison, reciting words passed down through forbidden texts, phrases designed to bind and repel the primordial force. The keeper's voice was steady, a beacon of resolve amid the storm of uncertainty. Each participant focused their will, channeling a collective energy aimed at stitching the rift between worlds. The ground beneath them pulsed in rhythm, the symbols glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. But the entity was no passive adversary. It responded with a surge of power that rattled the earth and sent tremors through the crowd. Shadows stretched and twisted, swallowing the edges of the circle and creeping inward like ink spilled on parchment. The whispered voices escalated into an overwhelming cacophony, a tide of sound that threatened to drown out the human resolve. Panic flickered in eyes and clenched fists, but the ritual held firm, anchored by the collective determination of those who refused to yield. Suddenly, a scream shattered the chant, a cry of terror and pain. A figure at the edge of the circle collapsed, writhing as if gripped by invisible hands. The faceless presence appeared then, looming over the fallen, its intangible fingers reaching out. The crowd gasped, fear threatening to unravel their focus. The keeper stepped forward, raising his voice above the chaos, urging calm and unity. The sacrifice was unspoken but understood. The ritual demanded not only belief but offering, a price to be paid in blood or spirit. As the moments stretched, the circle's glow intensified, casting stark light on the faces of those bound by fate. The entity's grip faltered, shadows retreating inch by inch, unable to penetrate the protective boundary. Yet the battle was far from over. The town's very existence hung on the edge of a knife, balanced between the fading darkness and a fragile dawn. In that suspended moment, the whispering voices shifted tone, from threatening to mournful. Fleeting images flashed in minds, lost memories, forgotten promises, a yearning for release from eternal torment. The entity was not merely a destroyer but a prisoner, bound by ancient magic yet desperate to break free. This revelation stirred the crowd, transforming fear into a complex empathy, a shared recognition of suffering. The ritual reached its crescendo, voices blending into a singular force of will that surged outward. The ground trembled violently, cracks spiderwebbing across the soil, glowing veins of light tracing the fractures. Then, as suddenly as it began, the earth stilled. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a fragile warmth that seeped into bones and souls. The faceless figure vanished, leaving behind only a lingering echo of silence. Exhaustion swept through the gathering, relief mingling with uncertainty. The breach was sealed, at least for now, but the cost was etched into every face. The fallen were carried away, honored as guardians who had stood against the abyss. The town remained scarred, its peace tentative and fragile, shadowed by the knowledge that the ancient force slept, waiting for the veil to thin once more. In the days that followed, a cautious normalcy returned. The whispers faded to distant memories, and technology resumed its place in daily life. Yet the scars of the ordeal lingered in the collective consciousness. Dreams remained haunted by fleeting shadows, and a deep-rooted vigilance took hold. The Watchers persisted, their numbers dwindling but their mission unwavering, to guard against the return of the darkness. Elizabeth's disappearance remained unsolved, a haunting mystery intertwined with the ancient entity's story. Her sketches and journals became artifacts of a forgotten battle, clues to a struggle far beyond the limits of human understanding. The keeper's warnings echoed in the silence, vigilance must never waver, for the breach was a wound in the fabric of reality itself. The town had faced the abyss and survived, but the echoes of that night promised that the story was far from over. Somewhere, deep beneath the earth, the ancient force pulsed, patient, eternal, and waiting for the next fracture, the next whisper, the next moment when it might step fully into the world once again. The fragile calm that settled over the town after the ritual was deceptive, a thin veil stretched over an abyss of lingering uncertainty. Though the immediate threat seemed to have been quelled, the damage inflicted on the fabric of the community was deep and irreversible. The nights carried a stillness that was heavier than before, a silence pregnant with memories of the terror that had passed. People spoke less, eyes darting nervously toward the shadows, as if expecting the faceless figure to reappear at any moment. Trust had fractured alongside the earth, and even those who had stood shoulder to shoulder during the ritual now found themselves isolated by invisible walls of fear. The Watchers, once a scattered and informal group, took on renewed purpose. Their mission evolved from mere observation to active vigilance. They patrolled the edges of town, recording strange phenomena, monitoring shifts in electromagnetic activity, and maintaining the intricate patterns of protective symbols. What had once been an underground effort became an organized resistance against the unseen forces that still lingered. The Keeper emerged as their reluctant leader, his knowledge a beacon in the growing darkness that refused to fade. Scientists returned, poring over the data collected before, during, and after the ritual. Their instruments still registered anomalies, subtle but persistent distortions in spacetime. These fluctuations defied all known laws of physics, indicating that the breach in reality was not fully closed but merely suppressed. The implications were chilling. The entity was not gone, only waiting for another opportunity to reassert itself. The experts debated theories of dimensional overlap, quantum entanglement, and consciousness as a force capable of altering reality. None offered comfort, only a grim acknowledgement that humanity was unprepared for what lay beneath. Among the townsfolk, strange behaviors persisted. Some suffered from recurring nightmares of faceless eyes watching from the darkness. Others reported hearing whispered voices calling their names in the dead of night. A few succumbed to an overwhelming compulsion to return to the Rainford estate ruins, drawn by a force they could neither understand nor resist. These individuals often disappeared, slipping away in the early hours without warning, their fates unknown. The community grappled with grief and helplessness, haunted by the shadows of those lost. The cult that had once worshipped the entity as a liberator grew bolder in its defiance. They operated from the shadows, spreading cryptic messages and symbols throughout the town, graffiti etched on walls, strange markings left in public spaces, and coded pamphlets slipped under doors. Their ideology clashed violently with the Watchers, and tensions escalated into confrontations. Law enforcement struggled to maintain order, torn between addressing the cult's activities and managing the broader crisis. The conflict fractured what little unity remained, deepening the town's descent into paranoia. Amidst this turmoil, new figures emerged. Individuals claiming to have been touched by the entity appeared, marked by inexplicable changes, heightened senses, strange insights, and unsettling calm in the face of chaos. Some believed these touched to be chosen emissaries, messengers of a new era bridging the gap between worlds. Others saw them as threats, potential agents of the entity's return. The Watchers debated their place, uncertain whether to protect or oppose these altered beings. The town became a crucible for these uneasy alliances and fragile betrayals. In the midst of these swirling forces, the legacy of Elizabeth remained a haunting presence. Her disappearance was a wound in the narrative, a mystery unsolved and a key left dangling. Her journals and sketches circulated among those who dared to delve deeper, revealing hints of a connection between her own psyche and the entity. Some theorized that she had become a vessel, trapped between realities and still struggling to communicate warnings. Others whispered that she had transcended mortal bounds, transformed into something neither fully human nor fully other. The Keeper continued his solitary research, driven by a mix of obsession and duty. He uncovered fragments of ancient texts that spoke of a cyclical battle between light and shadow, a war waged across dimensions with stakes far beyond human comprehension. The entity was described as a primal force, neither inherently evil nor good, but indifferent to the human cost of its existence. It was a force of nature, a dark tide rising and receding with the rhythm of cosmic cycles. The knowledge brought no solace, only a deeper fear of the inevitability lurking beneath the surface. Despite the darkness, moments of resilience shone through. The community organized memorials for the lost, gatherings where stories were shared and bonds reforged. Acts of kindness, courage, and defiance punctuated the bleakness. The Watchers found new recruits, young and old alike, willing to stand guard against the unseen. Families clung to each other, determined to reclaim their town from the shadows. These flickers of hope became a fragile lifeline, a reminder that humanity's spirit could endure even when reality itself seemed to falter. Yet, beneath the surface of recovery, the entity's influence pulsed like a hidden heartbeat. Dreams grew more vivid, sometimes prophetic, blurring the line between waking and sleep. Time itself seemed to twist and loop, moments repeating with subtle variations that defied explanation. The faceless figure's image appeared in mirrors and reflections, a silent reminder of the breach that had been temporarily sealed but never truly closed. As the anniversary of the ritual approached, an undercurrent of unease spread through the town. The Keeper warned that the cycle was turning again, that the entity's patience was finite and its return inevitable. Preparations began anew, not merely to defend but to understand and confront what lay beneath. The town stood at a precipice, caught between fragile peace and the return of ancient darkness. The story of the entity and the town became a cautionary tale whispered beyond its borders, a legend of shadows and resilience. But the truth remained elusive, buried beneath layers of fear and forgotten history. The veil between worlds was thinner than anyone dared admit, and the next rupture awaited its moment. The battle was far from over. The anniversary of the ritual cast a long shadow over the town, a reminder that the battle fought months ago was not the end but merely a chapter in a larger, darker saga. The collective memory of that night, the trembling earth, the faceless figure, the chilling whispers, had settled into the town's identity like a scar that refused to fade. This scar shaped every thought, every glance cast toward the edge of the ruins, and every cautious step taken after sunset. The sense of a ticking clock loomed over the community, an unspoken understanding that time was winding down to a reckoning. Preparations to mark the day were subdued, tinged with a reverence born of survival and loss. The Watchers organized a vigil at the edge of the Rainford estate, an attempt to honor those who had fallen and to bolster the town's fragile defenses. Despite their efforts, unease clung to the air, thick and oppressive, as if the entity itself watched and waited for the moment to reclaim its foothold. The protective symbols etched into the earth had faded, worn by wind and rain, their glow diminished. The barrier between worlds had weakened, and the energy required to maintain it was draining from those who guarded it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows lengthened and deepened, swallowing the familiar contours of the landscape. The wind shifted, carrying with it faint echoes, snatches of voices, distant cries, and a low, rhythmic pulse that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. This pulse was the entity's heartbeat, a reminder of its relentless presence beneath the surface. It stirred something ancient and primal in the bones of the earth, awakening dormant fears that the town's inhabitants had struggled to suppress. Within the town, strange phenomena increased. Electrical devices malfunctioned inexplicably, lights flickering and dying without cause. Animals became restless, their behavior erratic and unnatural. Some townsfolk reported seeing shadows that moved against the light, shapes that lingered just beyond the edges of vision. These occurrences were not isolated but widespread, a manifestation of the entity's growing influence. The barrier's weakening was allowing the fabric between realities to fray, and the consequences rippled outward like waves. The Watchers intensified their efforts, reinforcing the protective circle with new symbols, combining ancient rituals with modern technology in a desperate attempt to hold the darkness at bay. They convened frequently, sharing observations and theories, but the answers they sought remained elusive. The entity's nature defied conventional understanding, a force that existed beyond the constraints of time and space, its motivations inscrutable and indifferent to human concerns. The community's survival depended on vigilance and unity, but cracks in both threatened to unravel their defense. Amidst this tension, a breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source. A young linguist, drawn to the town by curiosity and a passion for deciphering lost languages, discovered a hidden layer within the keeper's translations. Embedded within the ancient texts was a cryptic passage hinting at a ritual of reversal, an ancient method to not only seal the breach but to purge the entity's influence entirely. The ritual required rare components and precise timing, elements that aligned only once every several decades. The anniversary marked that fleeting window, a critical moment when the town's fate could be rewritten. Hope ignited alongside fear. The Watchers embraced the possibility of a definitive solution but recognized the immense risk. The reversal ritual demanded sacrifices and carried dangers that could rival the entity's own wrath. It was a gamble against an unknown cosmic force, a wager with the fabric of reality itself. Preparations began immediately, gathering the necessary artifacts and enlisting those willing to face the unknown. The community was divided, some desperate for salvation, others wary of provoking the darkness further. As the night deepened, a storm gathered on the horizon, an unnatural tempest that seemed to mirror the turmoil within the town. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the ruins in stark flashes, while thunder rolled like a drumbeat heralding an ancient war. The storm's intensity reflected the entity's agitation, its power swelling in anticipation of the coming ritual. The line between natural and supernatural blurred, and the town became a nexus where forces collided and intertwined. In the hours before the ritual, memories of Elizabeth resurfaced with haunting clarity. Her disappearance took on new meaning, her connection to the entity revealed as part of a larger cosmic balance. It was suggested that she had become a key element in the reversal ritual, a bridge between worlds whose sacrifice might tip the scales. The weight of her absence settled heavily on those who knew her, mingling grief with determination. She had been both victim and guardian, and now her legacy would shape the town's fate once more. As the first chants of the reversal ritual began, the entity's response was swift and violent. The earth trembled, shadows lengthened, and a palpable tension surged through the air. The faceless figure appeared again, more defined and menacing than before, its form radiating a dark energy that bent the very light around it. The battle for the town's soul reignited with ferocity, a cosmic struggle played out on the fragile stage of human existence. Every word uttered, every symbol traced, was a thread in the tapestry of survival. The community's collective will clashed against the entity's primordial force, a contest not just of power but of meaning and purpose. The stakes were existential, the survival of the town, the preservation of reality's fabric, and the hope that light could overcome darkness even when the abyss threatened to consume everything. In those moments, the town was both battlefield and sanctuary, a place where ancient forces and human courage intertwined. The outcome was uncertain, but the resolve was undeniable. The legacy of the entity, the Watchers, and the missing Elizabeth converged in a crescendo of cosmic significance, shaping the destiny not only of one small town but of the fragile boundary between worlds. The clash between the reversal ritual and the entity's wrath unleashed a torrent of chaotic energy that shook the very foundations of the town. The air crackled with static, charged with the collision of forces far beyond mortal comprehension. Time itself seemed to warp, stretching and folding as the boundary between realities weakened under the strain. The faceless figure's presence was overwhelming, a dark monolith pulsing with ancient power, intent on undoing the fragile thread the townspeople had spun against oblivion. The Watchers, standing at the center of the ritual circle, held their ground with grim determination. Their chants wove a complex pattern of sound and intention, each syllable a bulwark against the encroaching void. The symbols they traced glowed faintly, resisting the entity's attempts to corrupt and extinguish them. Every heartbeat was a battle, every breath a defiance. The group was united not just by knowledge or duty but by sheer will, the human spirit refusing to bow to darkness. Outside the protective circle, reality fractured unpredictably. Objects shifted in and out of place, the ground cracked open in spectral fissures that revealed glimpses of otherworldly realms, vast voids speckled with distant stars, twisted landscapes that defied physics and sanity. The wind carried whispers in languages unknown, some pleading, others mocking, but all laced with a sinister intent. The townspeople, gathered behind the Watchers, watched in a mix of fear and awe, knowing that their world hung by a tenuous thread. The reversal ritual demanded a sacrifice of both physical and metaphysical essence. It required a conduit, someone bound to both worlds, whose presence could anchor the ceremony and channel the energy needed to seal the breach. The absence of Elizabeth was felt acutely, and her journals hinted that she might have been that conduit. But in her disappearance lay a grim possibility: she might still be trapped between realities, caught in the entity's grasp or transformed by it. The thought weighed heavily on those who had come to respect her courage and intellect. As the ritual intensified, the air grew thick with a tangible tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The entity lashed out with ferocity, manifesting tendrils of darkness that snaked toward the Watchers, seeking to unravel their work. Each attack was met with a surge of light, a ripple of ancient magic and modern resolve intertwining in defiance. The battle was not just for the town but for the integrity of reality, a war waged on a scale that dwarfed human understanding. In the chaos, unexpected phenomena emerged. Some of the touched, those altered by the entity's previous influence, found themselves drawn to the ritual's energy. Their presence was a double-edged sword. They could amplify the protective force or, if swayed by the entity, could become conduits for destruction. A tense debate unfolded among the Watchers, balancing hope against risk, trust against suspicion. The touched who chose to stand with the Watchers became symbols of humanity's resilience, proof that even the darkest touch could be reclaimed. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within. Lightning cracked open the sky, illuminating the ruins in ghostly flashes. Thunder rolled like a drumbeat, punctuating the chants and cries that echoed through the night. The boundary between natural and supernatural blurred, each feeding into the other in a relentless cycle. The earth trembled beneath their feet, as if struggling to maintain its own existence against the cosmic forces at play. Amid this cosmic tempest, the ritual reached its crescendo. The energy converged on a focal point, a shimmering vortex that pulsed with blinding light and crushing darkness intertwined. It was a gateway, a wound in the fabric of reality that the ritual sought to mend. The Watchers poured their strength into the vortex, chanting, tracing symbols, and sacrificing their own vitality to bind the breach. Then, the unexpected happened. From within the vortex emerged a figure, Elizabeth. But she was changed, her form shimmering with ethereal light and shadow, a living nexus between worlds. Her eyes held the knowledge of countless realms, and her presence brought a fragile hope that the ritual might succeed. Yet, she was also a reminder of the cost. To wield such power was to be forever caught between realities, a guardian bound by sacrifice. Elizabeth's return galvanized the Watchers and the townspeople alike. Her knowledge allowed them to refine the ritual, to strengthen the seals and push back the entity's influence. The faceless figure, confronted by this renewed force, began to dissolve into the shadows from which it came, retreating but not vanquished. The breach slowly closed, the swirling energies calming as light reclaimed the fractured land. The night waned, and with the first light of dawn, the town found itself transformed. The scars remained, but the immediate threat had been pushed back, at least for now. The Watchers understood that the entity was not destroyed, such forces were eternal, cycles repeating through time. But the reversal ritual had bought the town a reprieve, a chance to rebuild and heal. Elizabeth, now both part of the town and apart from it, became a living legend, a bridge between human and cosmic realms. Her sacrifice was a testament to the power of courage and knowledge in the face of the incomprehensible. The townspeople, though weary, found strength in the unity forged through shared trial. The entity's shadow lingered, a reminder that darkness never fully disappears. But within that darkness, light endured, flickering, resilient, and defiant. The battle for the town, for reality itself, was far from over. Yet, in this fragile victory lay the enduring truth that even in the face of cosmic horror, humanity could still find hope. The aftermath of the ritual left the town in a state of cautious recovery, but beneath the surface, new tension simmered. The fragile peace that had been won was built on sacrifices and compromises, and the scars, both seen and unseen, were deep. The people of the town were forever altered, their lives marked by the experience of facing something so incomprehensible and powerful. The boundary between the mundane and the supernatural had been redrawn, and with it came a changed understanding of reality itself. Elizabeth's transformation into a bridge between worlds created a complex dynamic. She no longer fully belonged to the town nor to the other realm she now inhabited. Her presence was a beacon of hope and knowledge, but it also carried a weight of loneliness and separation. Those who had known her before grappled with the paradox of her existence, a living symbol of survival and sacrifice, yet also a reminder of what had been lost. Her insight into the cosmic forces at play became invaluable, but it also set her apart, a figure both revered and mourned. The Watchers, too, faced new challenges. The success of the reversal ritual came with a cost. Many of their number were physically and mentally exhausted, their energies drained by the immense effort required to hold the breach closed. The protective symbols and wards that once radiated strong power now needed constant maintenance and reinforcement. The knowledge that the entity's threat was not eliminated but merely contained kept the Watchers vigilant, their roles evolving from warriors to guardians and scholars. Trust became a fragile commodity within the community. The presence of the touched, those who had been marked or altered by the entity's influence, was a source of unease. Some saw them as survivors and allies, proof of humanity's resilience. Others feared that the darkness still lurking within them could ignite another catastrophe. Efforts to integrate the touched into society were met with mixed reactions, sparking debates about acceptance, fear, and the nature of evil. The town struggled to balance compassion with caution. As the months passed, subtle shifts in the environment indicated that the cosmic balance remained delicate. Reports of minor phenomena, flickering shadows, strange sounds, and fleeting apparitions surfaced sporadically. While nothing matched the intensity of the original breach, these signs reminded everyone that the entity's influence persisted, biding its time. The community's collective vigilance became a way of life, a silent agreement that the fight against darkness was ongoing. The younger generation, born or raised after the event, grew up with stories of the breach and the ritual, their childhoods shaped by legend and cautionary tales. Schools incorporated lessons about the town's history, blending folklore with the fragmented truths uncovered by the Watchers. This cultural memory became a foundation for identity and resilience, fostering a sense of responsibility to protect what had been won. Yet, curiosity and skepticism also blossomed, as some questioned the boundaries of reality and the nature of fear. Amid this atmosphere, a new figure emerged, an enigmatic outsider who arrived quietly, drawn by rumors and fragments of the town's story. This individual brought expertise in arcane studies and a perspective that challenged existing beliefs. Their arrival stirred both hope and suspicion, as the community debated the wisdom of opening their circle to new influences. The outsider's intentions were unclear, their knowledge deep but cryptic, hinting at connections beyond even the Watcher's understanding. The town's leadership faced difficult decisions. Balancing openness with protection, innovation with tradition, became an ongoing struggle. The scars of past conflicts influenced policy and personal relationships alike. Community meetings often revolved around how to safeguard against future breaches, how to support those affected by the entity's lingering presence, and how to rebuild a sense of normalcy without forgetting the lessons learned. Economic and social changes rippled through the town. The notoriety brought by the event attracted researchers, journalists, and curious visitors, creating both opportunities and disruptions. Local businesses adapted, some thriving by catering to the influx, others struggling with the shadow the town now cast. The tension between privacy and publicity was palpable, with residents divided over how much to reveal to the outside world. In the background, the natural world responded subtly to the cosmic upheaval. Flora and fauna exhibited unusual patterns, some species thriving in altered conditions, others retreating. These ecological shifts became a subject of study and concern, hinting at deeper connections between the entity's realm and the physical environment. Scientists and Watchers collaborated, seeking to understand these changes and their implications for long-term survival. Despite the lingering uncertainties, moments of profound humanity shone through. Acts of kindness, community gatherings, and shared rituals reinforced bonds and created new traditions. The memory of those lost, including Elizabeth's sacrifice, inspired a collective commitment to resilience and hope. Stories passed down through generations served as reminders that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, light could endure. Yet, beneath these moments of hope lay an undeniable truth: the entity had not been destroyed, only held at bay. The cosmic forces that shaped its existence were vast and indifferent, waiting patiently for another chance to break through. The town's story was far from over, and the fragile peace was a pause, not a conclusion. The coming years would test the community's strength and wisdom. The lessons of sacrifice, vigilance, and unity would be called upon again. As new mysteries emerged and old wounds healed, the town remained a sentinel on the threshold between worlds, a place where courage and fear intertwined, and where the battle against the unknown was an eternal vigil. The fragile equilibrium maintained by the town and the Watchers was tested in unexpected ways as the entity's subtle influence began to manifest through increasingly disturbing phenomena. Small incidents that at first seemed isolated grew into a pattern, unsettling the community and challenging the belief that the breach was securely sealed. These events, seemingly mundane yet tinged with an otherworldly malice, indicated that the cosmic force beyond the veil was probing its limits, searching for weaknesses, and perhaps trying to communicate or manipulate. Whispers of missing time, inexplicable cold spots, and fleeting shadows were reported with growing frequency. The townspeople found themselves plagued by vivid dreams and waking visions, fragments of other realms bleeding into their consciousness. These intrusions were disorienting, sometimes terrifying, and often impossible to explain logically. They fueled speculation and fear, reigniting old superstitions even among the most skeptical. The boundary between sanity and madness blurred for many, underscoring the precariousness of their situation. The Watchers expanded their efforts, increasing surveillance of known hotspots and reinforcing protective wards. However, these measures revealed cracks in the community's defenses. Some of the touched began exhibiting unexpected changes, episodes of violent behavior, unexplained disappearances, or cryptic warnings about the other side. These developments complicated the delicate trust built after the ritual. The once hopeful notion that the touched could be allies was replaced by a tense uncertainty, as some seemed to be slipping under the entity's lingering control. Amid this rising tension, the enigmatic outsider who had arrived months earlier took a more active role. Their research suggested that the entity's nature was not purely destructive but entwined with a complex cosmic ecosystem. It functioned like a parasite, feeding off the fears and chaos of the material world to maintain its presence. This perspective offered a new approach, one that combined containment with understanding. It proposed that fighting the entity through sheer force alone was futile. Instead, the town needed to find a way to coexist, or at least coexist temporarily, by managing the energies at play. This idea was controversial. Some Watchers and townsfolk saw it as dangerous appeasement, risking everything on an unknown gamble. Others recognized the wisdom in adapting their strategy, acknowledging that the entity's power was too vast for a single community to defeat. Heated debates unfolded in meetings and private conversations, revealing fractures within the once unified front. The balance between hope and despair shifted once again, testing the community's cohesion. The outsider introduced new rituals, blending ancient knowledge with modern science, aiming to stabilize the rift without reopening it. These ceremonies were cautious and experimental, designed to bind the entity's influence more tightly and reduce its ability to infiltrate human minds and reality. Participation was voluntary, but the stakes were clear: resistance meant vulnerability, and cooperation offered a fragile shield. The rituals required profound focus and sacrifice, straining the mental and physical limits of those involved. Meanwhile, the ecological anomalies deepened. Plants exhibited rapid, unnatural growth or withered inexplicably, animals behaved erratically, and weather patterns shifted unpredictably. These changes were more than environmental curiosities, they were symptoms of the cosmic disturbance affecting the physical world's fabric. Scientists collaborated closely with the Watchers, hoping to decipher these signals and predict future disruptions. The interplay between natural and supernatural forces became a critical field of study, emphasizing how deeply intertwined the entity's presence was with the town's existence. In the broader context, media coverage intensified. Investigative journalists, paranormal enthusiasts, and conspiracy theorists descended on the town, eager to uncover its secrets. While some residents welcomed the attention for economic reasons, others feared the risks of exposure. The influx of outsiders brought fresh perspectives but also increased danger, as unprepared visitors sometimes unwittingly triggered phenomena or interfered with the Watchers' efforts. Maintaining secrecy became a priority, complicating the community's ability to function normally. Personal stories emerged amidst the turmoil. Families struggled to support members affected by the touch's erratic behavior or the psychological toll of the ongoing crisis. Friendships and relationships were tested by fear and suspicion. Acts of kindness and courage continued, but the weight of uncertainty cast long shadows. The emotional landscape of the town was as turbulent as the physical and cosmic realms it confronted. One particularly disturbing trend was the rise in disappearances, people vanishing without a trace, often in areas previously affected by the breach. Investigations yielded few clues. Surveillance footage sometimes showed fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures or impossible distortions of space and time. The disappearances fueled rumors of abductions by the entity or transformations into something not quite human. Each loss deepened the community's fear and resolve, a grim reminder of the entity's enduring menace. Despite these challenges, the Watchers remained steadfast, adapting their methods and seeking new alliances. The Outsiders' knowledge opened pathways to forgotten lore and untapped power sources, offering glimmers of hope in a darkening world. The collective effort to understand and manage the entity's influence became a defining feature of the town's identity, a testament to resilience in the face of cosmic horror. The crisis was far from over, and the road ahead was uncertain. The entity's presence was a constant shadow, shaping the lives and destinies of everyone it touched. Yet, in the persistent struggle, the town found a new kind of strength, born from shared fear, sacrifice, and an unyielding will to survive. The cosmic dance between light and dark continued, and the Watchers stood as humanity's fragile guardians at the threshold. The strain on the town grew more pronounced as the entity's presence continued to ripple through the fabric of reality. Its influence extended beyond mere haunting whispers or strange phenomena. It seeped into the very essence of daily life, altering perceptions and relationships. The townspeople found themselves caught in an unrelenting battle not just against an external force, but against the erosion of their own minds and identities. This creeping corruption manifested in subtle, insidious ways. Individuals began to experience inexplicable shifts in personality. Once kind and rational neighbors became withdrawn, paranoid, or aggressive. Families fractured under the weight of these changes, with trust dissolving into suspicion. The entity, it seemed, thrived on discord, feeding off emotional turmoil to maintain its foothold in the mortal world. The social fabric of the community frayed, and isolation became common. The Watchers, already stretched thin by their protective duties, faced an internal crisis. Some among them questioned the sustainability of their mission, doubting whether containment alone was sufficient. The Outsiders' unorthodox approaches, though promising, faced resistance from traditionalists who feared the consequences of tampering further with forces beyond comprehension. This ideological divide threatened to weaken the organization just when unity was most crucial. As the entity's tendrils extended, physical manifestations intensified. Objects moved without cause, lights flickered erratically, and cold spots shifted unpredictably throughout homes and public spaces. Some reported hearing voices, soft, seductive whispers that promised power or salvation in exchange for loyalty. Others felt an overwhelming presence watching from the shadows, a sensation that bred paranoia and despair. These manifestations were not random. They targeted the vulnerable, those whose emotional defenses were weakest. Amid this growing chaos, a series of disturbing incidents alarmed the town. People were found in catatonic states, their minds seemingly trapped in nightmarish realms beyond the entity's veil. Medical professionals were baffled, unable to diagnose or treat these conditions. The affected displayed no physical injuries, but their eyes reflected a haunted emptiness, as if glimpsing horrors no human was meant to witness. These cases strained the local healthcare system and deepened the community's dread. The Watchers intensified their efforts to develop protective measures for these victims. Specialized rituals were devised to anchor consciousness back to the physical plane, but success was limited and unpredictable. The entity's power over the mental realm was formidable, challenging the boundaries of human endurance and resilience. Each failed attempt was a grim reminder of the stakes involved and the fragility of life itself. The town's atmosphere became charged with an uneasy energy, a collective anxiety that permeated everyday interactions. People hesitated to speak openly, fearing that even words might invite the entity's attention. Public gatherings dwindled, and once thriving social spaces grew quiet. The community's spirit, while still present, was overshadowed by a pervasive sense of vulnerability and impending doom. Yet within this darkness, moments of profound courage and compassion emerged. Individuals volunteered to face dangers others would not confront, offering themselves as shields or conduits to protect loved ones and neighbors. Stories circulated of small groups performing clandestine ceremonies, maintaining wards, or comforting those afflicted by the entity's assaults. These acts of bravery fostered fragile hope, a reminder that even in the bleakest times, humanity's resilience endures. The outsider's role evolved into that of a mentor and strategist, guiding the watchers toward new understandings of the entity's nature. Their research suggested that the cosmic force operated not just through fear and chaos, but also through manipulation of fundamental natural laws. It could warp time and space, distort memories, and fracture realities. This revelation reframed the conflict from a battle of strength to a war of perception and willpower. To counteract these distortions, the Watchers explored techniques that combined mental discipline, ritualistic precision, and emerging technology. Meditation practices were introduced to strengthen mental fortitude, while devices designed to detect and neutralize anomalous energies were deployed strategically. Training sessions focused on recognizing subtle signs of the entity's influence and responding swiftly to prevent escalation. Despite these advancements, setbacks were frequent and costly. The entity adapted quickly, exploiting weaknesses and infiltrating unexpected areas. Every victory was tentative, every success shadowed by the knowledge that the threat persisted. The psychological toll on the Watchers was immense, with some succumbing to exhaustion, despair, or even disappearance. The line between hunter and hunted blurred. The townspeople, meanwhile, struggled to maintain a semblance of normal life. Children attended schools where lessons included both conventional subjects and awareness of the supernatural dangers surrounding them. Parents balanced protecting their families with engaging in community defense efforts. Economic challenges compounded the strain, as businesses faced disruptions from unexplained phenomena and shifting public perceptions. In this crucible, the town's identity transformed. What had once been a quiet, ordinary place became a symbol of resistance against unfathomable darkness. The narrative of survival intertwined with the cosmic horror they faced, creating a complex legacy that would shape generations. The entity's shadow loomed large, but so did the determination to endure. As the conflict persisted, questions arose about the ultimate cost of victory. What sacrifices would be required to permanently sever the entity's hold? Could humanity coexist with such a presence, or was total eradication the only path to peace? These questions haunted the community, fueling debates and dreams alike. The battle was far from over, but amidst the uncertainty, one truth remained clear: the fight was not just for a town or a moment in time. It was for the very essence of reality and humanity's place within it. The Watchers and the Watched, the living and the spectral, were entwined in a struggle that transcended comprehension, a struggle that defined the thin, fragile line between hope and oblivion. The entity's grip tightened in ways that defied explanation, altering the town's rhythm and warping the boundaries between the known and the unknowable. Its presence was no longer just an invisible force lurking in shadows but had begun to manifest through more tangible, terrifying phenomena that blurred the lines between reality and nightmare. The distinction between what was real and what was manipulated became increasingly elusive, forcing the townspeople into a state of constant vigilance and dread. At the heart of this turmoil was the understanding that the entity did not operate as a singular, isolated force. Instead, it was part of a vast, incomprehensible cosmic network, feeding on the emotional and psychic energy of those it ensnared. This revelation changed the nature of the conflict. It was no longer a simple battle to contain or banish a malevolent presence, but a fight against a sprawling, parasitic web that intertwined with existence itself. Every thought, fear, and hope became potential sustenance or weapon in this multidimensional war. The Watchers adapted their tactics accordingly, moving from reactive measures to proactive strategies aimed at disrupting the entity's feeding mechanisms. This involved intense psychological training designed to strengthen the mind's defenses and develop resilience against manipulation. Techniques borrowed from ancient mysticism merged with modern neuroscience, creating a hybrid methodology focused on mental fortitude and emotional regulation. Practitioners learned to recognize subtle shifts in perception, hallmarks of the entity's influence, and to ground themselves in tangible reality despite overwhelming distortions. Despite these efforts, the entity's influence seeped deeper into the community's collective consciousness. Shared nightmares plagued entire neighborhoods, their content eerily synchronized as if drawn from a common source. These dreams were not random, they carried symbolic messages, warnings, or manipulative commands designed to fracture unity and sow chaos. The Watchers employed dream analysis as a critical tool, attempting to decode these visions and anticipate the entity's next moves. However, the dream's fluid and surreal nature often defied clear interpretation, leaving many questions unanswered. The physical environment also continued to shift in disturbing ways. Familiar landmarks appeared twisted or duplicated, pathways looped back on themselves, and time seemed to stretch or compress unpredictably. These spatial anomalies made navigation treacherous, with some residents becoming disoriented or lost for hours. Vehicles stalled inexplicably, electronic devices malfunctioned, and even natural laws seemed to bend in localized zones. Scientists working with the Watchers hypothesized that the entity's presence caused microwarpings of spacetime, creating pockets of altered reality that challenged the very foundation of physics. Such phenomena heightened fear and paranoia among the population. Social cohesion frayed as mistrust grew. Neighbors suspected one another of being under the entity's control or acting as unwitting agents of chaos. Reports of aggressive confrontations and sudden disappearances increased, with some attributing these events to possession or forced compliance by the entity. The community's attempt to self-police was strained, leading to the establishment of support networks and vigilance groups tasked with monitoring vulnerable individuals and preventing harm. In response to this growing unrest, the Watchers expanded their recruitment efforts, seeking individuals with heightened sensitivity to paranormal activity or unique cognitive abilities. These recruits underwent rigorous screening and training, learning to navigate the complex interplay between human psychology and cosmic horror. The organization's structure became more hierarchical and militarized, reflecting the escalating stakes. Leadership grappled with balancing transparency and secrecy. Too much disclosure risked panic, while too little bred rumors and misinformation. Amidst this turmoil, a subset of the touched, those altered by direct contact with the entity, began to exhibit unusual powers. Some developed heightened perception, the ability to sense distortions before they occurred. Others demonstrated limited control over the altered physics in their vicinity. These abilities were both a blessing and a curse, marking their bearers as both valuable assets and potential liabilities. The Watchers faced ethical dilemmas about how to integrate or isolate these individuals, fearing the entity's corruptive influence could deepen if left unchecked. The Outsiders' research provided crucial insights into these developments. They theorized that the entity's interaction with human consciousness created feedback loops, amplifying latent potentials and twisting them toward destructive ends. Understanding these mechanisms opened possibilities for targeted interventions, methods to stabilize the touched and potentially harness their abilities for defense. However, these experimental approaches carried risks, including psychological collapse or exacerbation of the entity's hold. The town's infrastructure bore the strain of these ongoing disruptions. Power outages, structural damages from unexplained forces, and communication breakdowns became routine challenges. Emergency services operated under heightened alert, with contingency plans for supernatural incidents integrated into standard protocols. Local government officials struggled to maintain order and provide resources, often clashing with the Watchers over jurisdiction and transparency. The media's sensational coverage fueled external pressures, attracting curiosity seekers and conspiracy theorists, further complicating containment efforts. Despite the chaos, cultural resilience persisted. Community leaders organized events aimed at reinforcing solidarity and mental health, blending traditional practices with new rituals inspired by the ongoing conflict. Artistic expressions, music, visual art, storytelling, became outlets for processing collective trauma and asserting identity in the face of existential threat. These acts of creation provided moments of reprieve and connection, anchoring the town's spirit amid the encroaching darkness. The conflict's scope extended beyond the town's borders as reports of similar phenomena emerged in neighboring regions. This suggested that the entity's influence was expanding or that multiple breaches were occurring simultaneously. Interagency collaborations formed, linking the Watchers with federal and academic institutions to share knowledge and coordinate responses. These alliances offered hope for broader solutions but also revealed the enormity of the challenge: cosmic forces indifferent to human boundaries and laws. Amidst these escalating stakes, personal stories of loss, sacrifice, and heroism multiplied. Individuals faced impossible choices, balancing self-preservation with the greater good. Bonds were forged and broken under pressure, highlighting the complexity of human nature confronted with cosmic horror. Each life touched by the entity became a narrative thread in a vast tapestry of struggle, resilience, and uncertainty. The entity's shadow remained ever present, a reminder that the war was far from won. Yet, in the interplay of light and dark, order and chaos, the town's inhabitants found strength in adaptation and unity. The fight for reality itself continued, a battle not just for survival, but for the preservation of human essence in the face of unimaginable cosmic forces. The ever-growing complexity of the entity's influence began to reveal a startling pattern, one that suggested an intelligence far more strategic and adaptive than initially believed. It was no longer simply reacting to human actions or environmental changes but appeared to be learning, evolving, and anticipating responses. This cognitive evolution hinted at a form of sentience that transcended traditional understandings of consciousness, merging the alien and the cosmic into a singular, terrifying force. The entity's methods became increasingly sophisticated, employing psychological warfare, spatial distortions, and manipulation of reality itself as tools in a calculated campaign to dominate and consume. The Watchers recognized the profound implications of this evolution. If the entity's intelligence continued to develop unchecked, it could achieve a level of control that rendered human resistance futile. This realization spurred a desperate escalation in research and countermeasures. New technologies were developed, devices designed to disrupt the entity's cognitive processes and sever its connection to the psychic energies it fed upon. These experimental tools operated at the intersection of quantum mechanics and metaphysics, challenging the limits of scientific understanding. Their deployment was risky, with unknown consequences for both the user and the fabric of reality. Parallel to these technological advancements, the Watchers deepened their study of ancient texts and occult knowledge. Historical records hinted at previous encounters with similar entities, often dismissed as myth or superstition. These accounts described rituals, symbols, and protective talismans that, when applied correctly, could weaken or repel the entity's influence. Combining this arcane wisdom with modern science created a multidisciplinary approach that offered the best chance for containment. However, the integration of these disparate fields demanded careful balance, as misuse of arcane practices risked exacerbating the threat. Within the town, the boundary between the natural and supernatural blurred further. Reports of spontaneous healings, prophetic visions, and moments of inexplicable clarity became more frequent, often associated with those closest to the touched. These phenomena suggested a deeper, more complex interaction between the entity's influence and human physiology and consciousness. Researchers speculated that the entity's presence was catalyzing latent evolutionary processes, albeit chaotically and dangerously. This sparked a philosophical debate about the nature of humanity and the potential costs of resisting or embracing such transformation. As the entity's reach extended, so did its methods of infiltration. It began to exploit the digital realm, manipulating online communications, social media, and data networks to spread misinformation, incite panic, and disrupt coordination efforts. This cyber-psychic assault introduced a new battleground where information integrity became as vital as physical security. The Watchers established a specialized cyber division tasked with countering the entity's digital influence, developing encryption methods and awareness campaigns to shield the public from manipulation. Yet, the entity's capacity for deception and mimicry made this an ongoing challenge. The social fabric of the town continued to strain under the weight of sustained terror and uncertainty. Families were torn apart by suspicion and fear, friendships fractured by divergent beliefs about the entity's nature and the appropriate response. Some embraced nihilism, believing resistance was futile, while others clung to hope and fought with unwavering determination. Religious groups experienced both growth and schism, interpreting the events through varying theological lenses, some viewing the entity as a test of faith, others as an apocalyptic sign. This ideological diversity complicated efforts to unify the community but also enriched the collective discourse on survival and meaning. In this climate, the Watchers sought to forge alliances beyond human borders. Attempts were made to communicate with other entities or forces potentially opposed to the entity's domination. Ancient myths about guardian spirits, cosmic entities, or otherworldly allies were revisited, inspiring speculative protocols aimed at establishing contact or summoning assistance. These endeavors blended scientific rigor with ritualistic ceremony, illustrating the desperation and innovation born from confronting an existential threat. While tangible results were limited, the psychological impact of these efforts helped sustain morale among some factions. Amid the escalating conflict, the phenomenon of echoes emerged, fragments of consciousness or memory imprints left behind by those who had been consumed or altered by the entity. These echoes manifested unpredictably, sometimes as fleeting whispers in the mind, other times as vivid hallucinations or ghostly apparitions. Researchers theorized that echoes represented residual psychic energy, trapped in liminal states between life and non-existence. Attempts to capture or study these echoes revealed that they could contain vital information about the entity's origins, tactics, or vulnerabilities. However, prolonged exposure carried risks of psychological destabilization or possession. The personal toll on those involved grew more pronounced. Many Watchers and touched suffered from chronic mental and physical ailments, insomnia, dissociation, debilitating fear, symptoms attributed to prolonged exposure to the entity's influence. Support networks expanded to include counseling, medical intervention, and communal care practices. Stories of sacrifice and resilience circulated widely, inspiring new recruits and sustaining hope. Yet, burnout and attrition remained critical issues, threatening the operational capacity of the resistance. Amid these challenges, a breakthrough occurred when a small group of touched individuals discovered a method to temporarily sever the entity's influence within localized zones. This null field effect, generated through a combination of technological devices and meditative focus, created pockets of normalcy where reality returned to its unaltered state. These zones became sanctuaries for civilians and hubs for strategic planning. Although temporary and limited in scale, the null fields represented a tangible victory and a proof of concept for larger-scale containment. This discovery reignited debates about long-term strategy. Should efforts focus on permanent eradication, containment, or coexistence? The complexity of the entity's nature defied simple answers. Some advocated for aggressive eradication attempts, despite risks of catastrophic backlash. Others argued for containment strategies prioritizing human survival and adaptation, accepting the entity's presence as a new reality. Still, a minority proposed deeper integration, exploring ways to harness the entity's power for human advancement. These conflicting visions underscored the profound uncertainty and high stakes of the conflict. Externally, governments and global organizations began to take notice as reports of the entity's effects leaked beyond the town. International interest brought additional resources but also political complications, as agendas and priorities diverged. The Watchers negotiated carefully to maintain autonomy while leveraging broader support. Media coverage intensified, further complicating information control but also raising awareness. The balance between secrecy and transparency became a critical operational consideration. Throughout these trials, the essence of the conflict remained a deeply human struggle, between fear and courage, despair and hope, isolation and community. Each individual's response to the entity's shadow shaped the collective destiny. The entity's presence forced an examination of humanity's vulnerabilities and strengths, challenging assumptions about reality, identity, and power. In confronting the cosmic unknown, the town's inhabitants grappled with the very definition of existence and the meaning of survival. The entity's evolution, the emergence of new phenomena, and the shifting human responses set the stage for an uncertain future, one where the boundaries of possibility were continually rewritten. The war for reality was ongoing, marked by moments of darkness and light, loss and discovery, despair and resilience. As the town braced for the next phase, the question remained, could humanity endure the cosmic storm, or would it be forever changed, or consumed, by the shadow that loomed? The entity's presence had become an all-consuming enigma, weaving itself into the fabric of everyday life with an unsettling persistence. Despite the Watcher's best efforts, the entity demonstrated an uncanny ability to adapt to every new strategy, every technological innovation, and every attempt to map its origins. Its very nature seemed fluid, slipping through conventional understanding like smoke through fingers, defying containment and comprehension alike. This constant evolution suggested the entity was not just an external force but a reflection of something far deeper, perhaps an intrinsic darkness embedded within the cosmos, or even within human consciousness itself. As months stretched into years, the town transformed into a living laboratory for this existential conflict. The boundary between reality and nightmare thinned, and the residents found themselves navigating a world where the laws of physics bent and twisted unpredictably. Time dilated in strange pockets, moments stretched into hours or collapsed into seconds, disorienting all who remained. The entity exploited these distortions to infiltrate minds and manipulate perceptions, making allies and enemies indistinguishable. Trust became a precious, fragile commodity, constantly tested by unseen forces. The Watchers delved further into the entity's past, tracing its footprints through history, myth, and legend. They uncovered references to a primordial force, sometimes called the Voidborn, that had haunted humanity's collective unconscious for millennia. This entity appeared in countless cultures under different guises, a shadow that devours light, a whisperer of madness, a harbinger of oblivion. Its recurring theme was corruption and transformation, consuming all that was known and replacing it with chaos. The parallels were undeniable, deepening the urgency to understand and combat this force before it fully realized its destructive potential. Amid this research, a startling theory emerged. The entity might not be a singular being but rather a collective consciousness formed from countless lost souls and fragments of shattered realities. Each act of consumption and corruption added to its power and complexity, making it an ever-expanding hive of despair and cunning. This notion blurred the line between monster and victim, raising profound ethical and philosophical questions. Was the entity a malevolent force seeking dominion, or an amalgamation of countless tragedies yearning for release? Could there be a way to sever its connections without annihilating those trapped within? These questions fueled a new wave of experimental approaches. The Watchers began exploring psychic resonance techniques, attempting to communicate with the entity's fractured consciousness rather than destroy it outright. Using advanced neurointerfaces combined with ancient meditative rituals, small teams entered controlled trance states designed to reach the entity's core. These psychic journeys revealed glimpses of the entity's internal landscape, dark labyrinths filled with echoes of pain, fear, and fragmented memories. Some operatives returned traumatized, haunted by voices and visions that lingered long after waking. Others came back with cryptic messages and hints of possible vulnerabilities. Simultaneously, the phenomenon of the touched evolved. Initially seen as victims or carriers of the entity's corruption, some touched began to exhibit unexpected abilities, enhanced perception, empathy, and even limited control over the entity's influence. This suggested a potential path to coexistence or even mastery over the darkness rather than succumbing to it. The discovery sparked hope and fear in equal measure, as the implications were vast. Could humanity adapt by integrating aspects of the entity's power, or would this only hasten its spread and ultimate domination? As the town grappled with these revelations, the social dynamics shifted dramatically. New factions formed among the Watchers and the Touched, some advocating for aggressive eradication, others for cautious integration, and still others for peaceful coexistence through mutual understanding. These ideological divisions sometimes erupted into violent clashes, reflecting the high stakes and deep emotional wounds inflicted by years of conflict. Community bonds strained, yet pockets of cooperation and solidarity persisted, fueled by shared survival instincts and a fragile hope for redemption. The broader world's reaction added another layer of complexity. Media coverage oscillated between sensationalism and outright censorship, as governments struggled to balance public awareness with panic control. International agencies debated intervention, but fears of triggering a global catastrophe stalled decisive action. Meanwhile, underground networks of researchers, mystics, and survivors exchanged information in secret, building a shadow resistance movement. This decentralized effort proved crucial in preserving knowledge and morale, serving as a lifeline for those caught in the entity's expanding shadow. In the midst of this turmoil, the phenomenon of the echoes intensified. These psychic remnants of consumed souls became more tangible and widespread, manifesting as fleeting apparitions, disembodied voices, and haunting memories embedded in objects and places. Some echoes offered guidance or warnings, others spread confusion and despair. Researchers theorized that echoes represented a residual consciousness fighting for recognition or liberation. Efforts to collect and understand them grew, revealing that some echoes contained fragments of the entity's own history and weaknesses, hidden clues left by those who had once resisted. At the heart of these developments was the fundamental question of identity and humanity. The entity's influence challenged the nature of selfhood, blurring distinctions between individual and collective, living and dead, reality and illusion. People began to question what it meant to be human in a world increasingly shaped by this cosmic presence. Philosophers, scientists, and spiritual leaders debated whether survival required transformation, a surrender of old identities and embrace of something new, or steadfast resistance to preserve the core of human experience. Amid these existential reflections, a sudden breakthrough emerged, a pattern in the entity's behavior that hinted at a possible failsafe embedded deep within its structure. This failsafe appeared to be a form of self-regulation, a mechanism that could be triggered to collapse the entity's influence without complete annihilation. The discovery reinvigorated the Watchers and the Resistance, who began devising plans to exploit this vulnerability. However, the risks were immense. Activating the failsafe could destabilize reality itself, potentially causing widespread destruction if mishandled. As preparations for this high-stakes gambit advanced, the town braced for the coming storm. The entity's reach had extended beyond any known boundary, touching lives and altering realities in ways that defied comprehension. Yet, within the heart of this darkness flickered the resilient spirit of humanity, adaptable, defiant, and ever searching for light amidst shadow. The impending confrontation promised to reshape not only the town but the very essence of existence, with consequences echoing far beyond any single place or time. The ultimate question remained: would humanity's fragile hope and ingenuity prevail against an ancient, ever-evolving darkness? Or would the entity consume all, erasing the boundaries between reality and oblivion forever? The answer lay in the uncertain horizon, waiting to be forged by those who dared to face the cosmic unknown. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface finally reached a breaking point. The entity's influence, once subtle and creeping, now surged like a relentless tide, engulfing entire neighborhoods in waves of despair and madness. Reports of inexplicable disappearances increased dramatically, and survivors spoke of impossible geometries and shifting landscapes where time looped back on itself. The town, already frayed by years of conflict, seemed to teeter on the brink of unraveling completely. In this climate of fear and uncertainty, the Watchers intensified their efforts to activate the discovered failsafe. Their plan was intricate and fraught with peril, requiring synchronization between psychic operatives, technological arrays, and the fragile alliance of the touched. The fail-safe was theorized as a kind of psychic resonance frequency designed to disrupt the entity's core structure, forcing it to contract and sever its parasitic links to reality. However, executing the plan demanded absolute precision and a willingness to face potentially catastrophic side effects, including reality fractures and temporal displacements. The touched played a critical role in this operation. Those among them who had learned to harness fragments of the entity's power were now being trained to amplify and stabilize the resonance signal. This process was exhausting and dangerous, often pushing individuals to the brink of mental collapse. Yet, many volunteered, driven by a desperate hope to reclaim their town and restore a semblance of normalcy. The bond between the touched and the watchers grew stronger, forged in the shared crucible of survival and resistance. As preparations advanced, the entity responded with escalating aggression. It unleashed manifestations of raw chaos, distorted creatures born of nightmares and the fragmented memories of the consumed. These entities acted as guardians and hunters, relentlessly pursuing the watchers and touched, attempting to disrupt their coordination. Entire districts became battlegrounds, with shifting realities and psychic storms making navigation perilous. The physical and metaphysical defenses that once held the entity at bay now seemed porous, straining under the relentless assault. Amid the turmoil, cracks appeared within the resistance itself. Factions debated the wisdom of pressing forward with the fail-safe, weighing the promise of liberation against the risk of annihilation. Some argued for continued containment and research, fearing the unknown consequences of tampering with such a volatile force. Others demanded immediate action, unwilling to endure further loss and corruption. These divisions threatened to fracture the fragile unity that had sustained the fight for so long, adding an additional layer of danger to an already precarious situation. In parallel, the echoes multiplied, their presence growing more tangible and urgent. Some became guides, offering cryptic insights and warnings that proved invaluable to the resistance's planning. Others descended into madness, their voices sowing confusion and fear. The watchers struggled to interpret these spectral messages, attempting to piece together a coherent strategy from the fragments of consciousness trapped within the entity's vast hive mind. Each new revelation brought hope and despair in equal measure, underscoring the complexity of the challenge ahead. The wider world watched in wary silence. News of the town's plight filtered through, sparking both fascination and horror. Governments debated intervention, while media outlets speculated wildly, often sensationalizing the events. Public fear surged, prompting crackdowns on information and strict quarantines. International coalitions began covert research collaborations, hoping to contain or replicate the phenomenon. The entity's reach, it seemed, might extend far beyond a single town, threatening the stability of entire regions or even nations. Within this maelstrom, a small cadre of individuals emerged as pivotal figures, the ones who could bridge the gap between humanity and the cosmic unknown. Their unique combination of resilience, insight, and psychic sensitivity positioned them at the forefront of the final effort to activate the fail-safe. Each carried scars, visible and invisible, from years of confrontation with the entity and its horrors. Yet their determination burned fiercely, fueled by memories of lost loved ones, shattered homes, and a shared vision of a future reclaimed from darkness. The night before the operation, silence fell over the town, a fragile calm before the inevitable storm. The resistance gathered in the heart of the battered city, synchronizing their devices and preparing their minds. Rituals old and new intertwined as scientists, mystics, and psychics combined their knowledge. The air was thick with tension and unspoken fears, but also a steely resolve. This was the culmination of years of struggle, the moment when hope and despair would collide in a battle for reality itself. As the resonance frequency began to pulse, a palpable shift rippled through the town. Reality trembled, and the entity reacted with a fury unlike any before. The psychic storm unleashed by the failsafe tore through the fabric of the entity's consciousness, fracturing its hive mind and severing its parasitic tendrils. Yet, the backlash was immediate and devastating. Time fractured, spaces folded, and the town itself became a chaotic nexus where past, present, and future collided. The watchers and touched fought to maintain focus, their collective will anchoring the unstable reality. In the midst of this chaos, the entity's true nature flickered into view, an endless mosaic of suffering and defiance, pain and hope intertwined. It was not a monolithic force but a complex, evolving consciousness shaped by millennia of human fear and resilience. The failsafe's impact created a rupture, allowing some trapped souls to break free even as the entity itself shrieked and convulsed in a death throe. This moment of vulnerability was fleeting but critical, a chance for the resistance to push through and reclaim their world. The battle waged on, a cosmic struggle that transcended conventional understanding. The town streets became arenas where psychic energies clashed with ethereal shadows, and the very essence of existence was contested. Each moment felt eternal, every breath a victory or defeat. The outcome remained uncertain, balanced on a razor's edge between annihilation and salvation. Through it all, the human spirit, fragile, defiant, and luminous, held fast against the encroaching void. When the storm finally began to subside, the landscape was irrevocably altered. Some parts of the town were lost to temporal scars, others scarred but intact. Survivors emerged, changed but alive, carrying the legacy of a fight that transcended time and space. The entity's presence was diminished, fragmented but not extinguished, a reminder that some darkness never fully dies but can be contained, understood, and perhaps, one day, healed. In the aftermath, the survivors faced a new reality, one where the boundaries between mind and matter, past and present, had forever blurred. The town became a symbol of resilience and warning, a testament to humanity's capacity to confront and endure the unknown. The struggle was far from over, but the victory forged a path forward, a fragile beacon of hope in a universe shadowed by ancient, cosmic mysteries. The survivors struggled to make sense of the altered reality they now inhabited. The town was both familiar and alien, streets shifted unpredictably, buildings warped, and moments from different times overlapped like fractured reflections in a cracked mirror. Despite the chaos, life began to adapt, driven by a fierce determination to rebuild what had been lost. People learned to navigate the new world with cautious resilience, forming communities bound by shared trauma and hope. Technology and mysticism merged as the survivors combined their knowledge to create tools capable of stabilizing the fractured environment. Devices harnessing psychic energy and quantum physics emerged, designed to anchor pockets of reality and prevent further distortions. These innovations allowed the townspeople to carve out safe zones where time flowed linearly, and the shadows of the entity's influence were diminished. These sanctuaries became hubs of recovery and research, attracting those seeking refuge or answers. Psychic healers, once rare and mistrusted, gained prominence as essential figures in the recovery process. Their abilities to mend mental and spiritual wounds were vital in combating the lingering effects of the entity's corruption. They worked tirelessly to ease nightmares, calm temporal dissonance, and help survivors reconcile fragmented memories. Their efforts fostered a new understanding of the human mind's resilience and its potential to transcend trauma through collective support and ritual. The Watchers evolved from secretive operatives into community leaders and educators. Their experience in confronting the entity made them invaluable guides in this transformed world. They established training programs to teach others how to perceive and resist residual distortions, cultivating a new generation equipped to defend against future threats. These programs emphasized cooperation, mindfulness, and the integration of scientific inquiry with spiritual insight, reflecting the hybrid nature of the town's rebirth. Despite these advances, the entity's remnants persisted. Small pockets of corruption flared unpredictably, warping minds and spaces with nightmarish illusions. Hunters, twisted echoes of the original horrors, stalked the outskirts of safe zones, reminding survivors that vigilance was crucial. These dangers reinforced the community's unity, a shared struggle forged bonds of trust and interdependence. The people understood that their survival depended not just on individual strength but on collective vigilance and compassion. External interest in the town intensified as its unique condition became known. Scientists, government agencies, and private organizations converged, eager to study the phenomena and harness its potential. This influx brought both opportunities and challenges. While research accelerated understanding and recovery techniques, it also introduced political tensions and ethical dilemmas. Debates raged over the rights of the affected population, the use of psychic technologies, and the risk of exploitation or militarization. Amid these pressures, a faction of survivors emerged advocating for isolation and self-determination. They feared that external interference might reignite the entity's influence or fracture the fragile equilibrium achieved. This group emphasized cultural preservation, mental health, and the cultivation of local knowledge. Their stance sparked dialogue about autonomy, consent, and the responsibilities of the global community toward those touched by cosmic catastrophe. These discussions highlighted the complex intersection of trauma, power, and healing. The survivors also grappled with personal reckonings. Many faced the challenge of integrating their experiences into a coherent sense of identity. Memories overlapped, timelines blurred, and the boundary between self and other sometimes dissolved. Therapy and communal storytelling became vital tools, enabling individuals to share their fragmented histories and find meaning amid chaos. These narratives wove a collective memory that honored loss and resilience, forming a foundation for renewed hope. Children born after the event exhibited unusual abilities, heightened intuition, sensitivity to temporal shifts, and an innate understanding of the altered environment. These newborns became symbols of possibility and renewal, embodying the fusion of human and cosmic forces that defined the town's transformation. Their upbringing blended traditional education with training in psychic awareness and environmental stewardship, preparing them to navigate and protect the fragile world they inherited. Cultural expressions flourished in this new context. Art, music, and ritual adapted to reflect the community's experiences and aspirations. Murals depicting the battle against the entity and the reclamation of reality adorned walls. Songs blended haunting melodies with rhythms inspired by fractured time, evoking both sorrow and strength. Festivals celebrated survival and unity, reinforcing bonds and affirming life in the face of cosmic uncertainty. These creative outlets became vital for processing trauma and fostering collective resilience. The town's story spread as a cautionary tale and beacon of endurance. It inspired other communities facing threats both earthly and otherworldly to explore new ways of integrating science, spirituality, and community action. International collaborations formed, exchanging knowledge and strategies to confront anomalies and cosmic dangers. The survivor's journey underscored the importance of adaptability, empathy, and cooperation in confronting challenges that transcend traditional understanding. Despite progress, unanswered questions remained. The true origin of the entity, the extent of its influence, and the potential for future incursions lingered as mysteries. Researchers and mystics continued to explore these enigmas, driven by curiosity and a desire to prevent recurrence. Their investigations suggested that the universe might harbor other hidden threats and that humanity's place within the cosmic order was more precarious than ever imagined. The survivors embraced this uncertainty with cautious optimism. They recognized that healing was an ongoing process, requiring vigilance and humility. The legacy of the entity's invasion was a profound transformation, not just of their town but of their worldview. It challenged assumptions about reality, power, and connection, inviting a deeper exploration of what it meant to be human in a vast and often unfathomable cosmos. In the end, the town became a testament to resilience and adaptation. Its people, marked by trauma yet defined by hope, forged a new path forward, one that honored the past while embracing the unknown. The entity's shadow remained, a reminder of the fragility of existence and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Through struggle and unity, the survivors reclaimed their reality, transforming tragedy into a source of strength and possibility for generations to come. The aftermath of the entity's arrival left the town irrevocably changed, but a new chapter had begun, one marked by both hope and the lingering shadows of trauma. The survivors, having endured the unthinkable, now faced the complex task of rebuilding not only their physical world but also the fabric of their collective identity. As the boundaries of time and space slowly stabilized within their safe zones, questions about the future grew ever more urgent. Researchers had begun to uncover startling revelations about the entity's nature and origins. It was not simply a malevolent force but a manifestation of cosmic entropy, a convergence point where the universe's chaotic undercurrents seeped into the human realm. This understanding reframed the disaster as part of a larger cosmic process, one that threatened not just the town but the stability of reality itself. The implications were profound, igniting both fear and determination among those who sought to protect humanity's fragile existence. Efforts to establish communication with the entity, or what remained of it, became a central focus. A coalition of scientists, mystics, and survivors experimented with ritualistic and technological means to bridge the gap between dimensions. Some believed that dialogue could lead to containment or even reversal of the damage. Others feared it might provoke further destruction. These tensions underscored the delicate balance between knowledge and danger, and the ethical dilemmas inherent in confronting forces beyond human comprehension. Amid these high-stakes investigations, the community's social dynamics evolved. Leadership structures shifted toward more inclusive and cooperative models, reflecting the need for collective wisdom in the face of ongoing uncertainty. Decision-making processes emphasized transparency, dialogue, and the integration of diverse perspectives, scientific, spiritual, and experiential. This new governance style fostered resilience and adaptability, crucial traits in navigating a world where reality itself was no longer fixed. Education became a cornerstone of recovery and prevention. Schools incorporated curricula that blended conventional subjects with training in psychic awareness, temporal navigation, and community ethics. Young people grew up understanding the fragility of their world and the responsibilities they bore as stewards of its continuity. This generational shift promised a future where humanity might better coexist with cosmic forces and prevent similar catastrophes. The mental health crisis that followed the entity's incursion required innovative approaches. Traditional therapies were augmented by group rituals, art therapy, and technology-assisted healing sessions that leveraged the survivors' psychic sensitivities. These methods helped individuals process trauma, restore coherence to fragmented memories, and rebuild trust in themselves and others. Community-wide healing ceremonies became regular events, reinforcing solidarity and collective empowerment. Meanwhile, the entity's residual influence manifested in unexpected ways. Some survivors developed unique abilities, heightened perception, temporal elasticity, or empathic resonance, that both aided and challenged daily life. These gifts were a mixed blessing, offering new tools for protection and understanding but also attracting fear and suspicion. The community worked to normalize and integrate these differences, emphasizing respect and support rather than alienation. Conflicts occasionally erupted, sparked by differing views on how to manage the ongoing threats and the role of external entities. Debates over openness versus isolation, scientific experimentation versus spiritual caution, and individual rights versus communal safety highlighted the complexity of governance in this extraordinary context. These disputes, though difficult, ultimately strengthened the community's commitment to dialogue and compromise. Externally, the town became a symbol of resilience and caution. Its experiences influenced policy discussions on disaster response, mental health, and the ethics of supernatural phenomena. International partnerships formed to share knowledge and develop protocols for dealing with similar events elsewhere. The survivors' stories inspired a global movement toward greater awareness of humanity's place in a vast, mysterious cosmos. Yet, despite these strides, the entity's threat was never fully vanquished. Periodic surges of temporal distortion and psychic disturbance reminded all that the battle was ongoing. Vigilance remained paramount, with specialized teams monitoring anomalies and responding swiftly to emerging dangers. These efforts reinforced a collective understanding that coexistence with cosmic forces required humility, preparation, and unity. The cultural landscape reflected this complex reality. Literature, music, and visual arts explored themes of transformation, memory, and the interplay between order and chaos. New rituals emerged to honor lost lives and acknowledge the continuing struggle. These expressions provided catharsis and connection, anchoring the community's evolving identity in shared meaning and creative resilience. On a personal level, many survivors found renewed purpose through service and mentorship. Those who had endured the darkest moments now guided others through recovery and adaptation. Their stories of survival and hope became living legacies, passed down as lessons and inspirations. This cycle of healing and teaching fortified the community's bonds and ensured that knowledge was preserved and expanded. Looking ahead, the survivors embraced a vision of coexistence, acknowledging the universe's unpredictability while committing to protect their world and each other. They understood that their journey was part of a larger cosmic narrative, one that required courage, wisdom, and compassion. This perspective infused their efforts with meaning and resolve, transforming tragedy into a catalyst for growth. In the end, the town stood as a testament to humanity's resilience and capacity for renewal. It was a place where scars were visible but no longer defining, where fear had been met with courage, and where the unknown was met not with despair but with determination. The entity's shadow remained, a reminder of the delicate balance between light and darkness, order and chaos. But within that shadow, the light of human spirit burned bright, an enduring beacon for all who sought to understand and endure in an uncertain universe. The revelation that the entity's influence extended beyond the initial disaster sparked a new wave of urgency among the survivors and researchers. It became clear that what they had witnessed was not an isolated event, but part of a recurring cosmic pattern, an ebb and flow of interdimensional disturbances that had affected civilizations throughout history, often with catastrophic consequences. This knowledge deepened the stakes, transforming their mission from one of mere survival to a proactive struggle against forces that transcended human understanding. Patterns in the residual distortions began to emerge, subtle fluctuations in time and space that hinted at the entity's lingering presence. Scientists developed advanced detection tools capable of mapping these anomalies, creating real-time visualizations of the fabric of reality as it wavered and shifted. These maps became essential for predicting future incursions and for planning protective measures. The technology, a hybrid of quantum physics and psychic science, represented the cutting edge of human ingenuity in confronting the incomprehensible. The community's approach evolved to include a network of sentinel outposts, strategically located to monitor temporal and dimensional fluxes. These outposts served as early warning systems, staffed by trained operatives skilled in both scientific analysis and intuitive perception. The operatives worked in tandem with Central Command, relaying data and responding to emerging threats with precision. This system of vigilance embodied the new reality, a world where the boundaries between science and mysticism blurred, and constant readiness was essential. At the heart of this network was the integration of survivor abilities. Those who had developed heightened senses or temporal sensitivity were invaluable assets, often able to detect disturbances before instruments could register them. Their contributions shifted public perception, fostering greater acceptance and respect for the paranormal as a vital element of communal defense. Training programs emerged to help others cultivate and control such abilities, emphasizing discipline and ethical use. As knowledge grew, so did the complexity of the challenges faced. Not all anomalies were hostile. Some appeared as benign or even beneficial fluctuations, offering glimpses into alternate timelines or parallel realities. These phenomena invited both fascination and caution, raising philosophical questions about free will, destiny, and the nature of existence. Scholars, mystics, and scientists engaged in ongoing debates, seeking to understand how to harness or coexist with these phenomena without triggering unintended consequences. The town became a crucible for innovation and experimentation. Laboratories and think tanks flourished, attracting experts from diverse fields eager to collaborate. This melting pot of ideas led to breakthroughs in energy harnessing, temporal navigation, and interdimensional communication. Yet, with every advance came new risks, unintended side effects, ethical quandaries, and the ever-present possibility of provoking further destabilization. Meanwhile, the psychological toll on the population required continuous attention. The constant awareness of an unseen cosmic threat weighed heavily on mental health, demanding sophisticated support systems. Holistic therapies, combining technology, community rituals, and ancient practices, aim to build resilience and foster a shared sense of purpose. Mental health professionals worked closely with spiritual leaders and scientists to create integrated care models that addressed the unique needs of this extraordinary environment. Public education campaigns were launched to demystify the phenomena and combat misinformation. Transparency was prioritized to maintain trust, with regular briefings and accessible resources provided to all citizens. This openness helped prevent panic and fostered a culture of informed vigilance, empowering individuals to recognize and respond to anomalies safely. At the international level, the town's experience spurred cooperation between nations. Governments established protocols for reporting and managing dimensional disturbances, sharing data and resources to build a global defense network. This unprecedented collaboration bridged geopolitical divides, united by the common goal of safeguarding reality itself. The town's experts became key advisors, their insights shaping policies and emergency response strategies worldwide. Culturally, the entity's enduring presence inspired a renaissance of artistic expression. Writers, musicians, and visual artists explored themes of transformation, uncertainty, and cosmic interconnectedness. Their works provided not only entertainment but also avenues for processing collective trauma and envisioning hopeful futures. Festivals and exhibitions celebrated this creativity, reinforcing community identity and resilience. Religious and spiritual perspectives adapted as well. Traditional beliefs were reinterpreted in light of new realities, while emerging spiritual movements focused on harmony with cosmic forces and stewardship of temporal balance. Interfaith dialogues promoted understanding and unity, reflecting the community's commitment to inclusivity amid profound change. Amid these developments, the survivors grappled with personal journeys of meaning and legacy. Many sought to document their experiences, creating archives that combined factual records with personal narratives, art, and ritual. These archives served as both historical testament and guideposts for future generations facing similar trials. Yet, despite progress, uncertainty remained the defining characteristic of existence. The entity's potential for resurgence was a constant shadow, reminding all that vigilance and humility were indispensable. Preparations continued, refining defenses, expanding knowledge, and cultivating the qualities needed to navigate a universe far stranger and more complex than anyone had imagined. In this ongoing struggle, the community found strength not only in science and strategy but in the unbreakable bonds forged through shared hardship. Their unity was their greatest weapon and their deepest hope, a reminder that even in the face of cosmic chaos, human spirit endures. The town's evolution into a beacon of resilience and innovation was accompanied by an unexpected emergence of new challenges, psychic phenomena that defied conventional explanation and tested the limits of human comprehension. These phenomena ranged from subtle shifts in perception to full-fledged episodes of collective hallucination, temporal loops, and memory distortions. Their unpredictable nature unsettled both experts and residents, raising urgent questions about the fragile boundary between reality and illusion. At first, these occurrences were isolated and sporadic, individuals reporting fleeting glimpses of impossible visions, hearing voices that vanished when sought, or experiencing déjà vu with an intensity that left them disoriented. As time passed, clusters of similar incidents began to form, suggesting a shared underpinning link to the entity's lingering influence. Researchers hypothesized that the entity had not fully retreated but existed as a diffuse psychic field interacting with human consciousness in complex, often disruptive ways. This realization spurred a new branch of study, blending neuroscience, quantum physics, and parapsychology. Teams worked to map the psychic landscape, identifying hotspots where distortions were most frequent and intense. Advanced imaging technologies captured fluctuating energy patterns around individuals and locations, revealing how human minds and the residual cosmic forces intertwined. The data suggested a dynamic feedback loop. Human thoughts and emotions could amplify or dampen these phenomena, implying that collective consciousness played a crucial role. Community leaders recognized that managing this psychic turbulence required more than scientific intervention. Cultural and social strategies became equally vital. Public workshops taught mindfulness, emotional regulation, and grounding techniques, equipping citizens to navigate altered states without succumbing to fear or confusion. Schools integrated curricula on mental resilience and the ethics of psychic interaction, fostering a generation attuned to their inner worlds and the larger cosmic context. The phenomenon of shared hallucinations presented particular challenges. Groups of people would experience synchronized visions, sometimes of hopeful or enlightening nature, other times disturbing or nightmarish. These shared experiences had the power to unite or divide, depending on interpretation and aftermath. Community forums became spaces for collective processing, where individuals could validate each other's perceptions, explore meanings, and build shared narratives that reinforced cohesion. Mental health practitioners adapted to these novel conditions by developing specialized therapies that combine traditional counseling with experiential techniques. Virtual reality environments simulated controlled psychic disturbances, allowing patients to confront and understand their experiences in safe settings. Art therapy, movement practices, and ritualistic expression helped integrate fragmented memories and emotions, fostering healing and empowerment. Ethical considerations surfaced prominently in the management of psychic phenomena. Privacy concerns arose as monitoring technologies advanced, raising debates about consent and autonomy. The potential for manipulation, whether intentional or accidental, demanded strict safeguards and transparent governance. Community councils included ethicists, legal experts, and citizen representatives to oversee policies and ensure respect for individual rights amidst collective safety imperatives. The unpredictable nature of psychic phenomena also attracted attention from external parties, academic institutions, private enterprises, and governmental agencies. While collaboration brought resources and expertise, it also introduced risks of exploitation and power struggles. The community maintained cautious engagement, balancing openness with vigilance to protect its hard-won autonomy and values. Among the population, reactions to the ongoing psychic disturbances varied widely. Some embraced the altered perceptions as gateways to expanded awareness and personal growth. Spiritual movements flourished, interpreting the phenomena as invitations to transcend ordinary reality and connect with deeper truths. Others struggled with fear, skepticism, or denial, leading to social tensions that required ongoing dialogue and reconciliation efforts. The collective experience of living amid these disturbances fostered a profound re-evaluation of identity and existence. Questions about the nature of consciousness, the limits of perception, and the interconnectedness of all things gained prominence. Philosophers, theologians, and scientists engaged in interdisciplinary discourse, enriching the community's intellectual and cultural life. In practical terms, the community adapted its infrastructure and routines to accommodate fluctuating realities. Public spaces incorporated design elements aimed at grounding and calming, such as natural materials, soundscapes, and interactive installations. Workplaces implemented flexible schedules and supportive environments to address cognitive and emotional variability. Emergency response protocols expanded to include psychic crises, ensuring timely and compassionate care. Despite the challenges, these psychic phenomena also offered opportunities. Insights gained from studying and living with the disturbances led to innovations in communication, creativity, and problem-solving. Collaborative projects harnessed collective intuition and imagination, resulting in breakthroughs that transcended traditional disciplinary boundaries. The community's reputation as a center of cutting-edge research and holistic living attracted visitors and new residents, further enriching its diversity and vitality. The ongoing dialogue between science and spirituality became a defining feature of this era. Neither perspective held exclusive authority; instead, they complemented each other in exploring the mysteries of the cosmos and the mind. Rituals evolved to incorporate scientific knowledge, while experiments were designed with respect for symbolic and experiential dimensions. This integration nurtured a culture of curiosity, respect, and humility. Underlying all these developments was a shared recognition of uncertainty as an intrinsic aspect of existence. The entity's legacy taught that control was often illusory and that adaptability and openness were essential virtues. This acceptance did not breed complacency but inspired vigilant engagement, a readiness to respond creatively and ethically to whatever might emerge. The community's story became a testament to the resilience and transformative potential of the human spirit. Faced with forces beyond comprehension, its people forged new pathways of understanding, connection, and meaning. The psychic phenomena, once feared as threats, became catalysts for growth, challenging assumptions, and expanding horizons. In embracing the unknown, the town embodied a profound truth, that in the interplay of light and shadow, certainty and doubt, chaos and order, lies the fertile ground for evolution. This ongoing journey, marked by courage and compassion, illuminated a way forward, not just for the community but for all who seek to navigate the mysteries of existence with wisdom and grace. The culmination of years spent unraveling the enigma brought the community to a pivotal crossroads, where the threads of science, spirituality, and human experience converged in unprecedented ways. The entity, once a distant and malevolent force, had become a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest fears and highest potentials. Its lingering presence was no longer simply a disruption but a catalyst, a profound invitation to redefine reality itself. The integration of psychic phenomena into daily life fostered a cultural renaissance, reshaping values and priorities. Empathy and interconnectedness emerged as foundational principles, guiding personal relationships and societal structures alike. People learned to listen not only to spoken words but to the subtle currents of emotion and thought that flowed between them, deepening bonds and fostering collective resilience. Education transformed radically, embracing a holistic approach that balanced intellectual rigor with emotional intelligence and intuitive insight. Schools became laboratories of exploration, where children were encouraged to question, create, and connect beyond conventional boundaries. Teachers acted as facilitators and guides, nurturing each individual's unique gifts while fostering a sense of shared responsibility for the community's well-being. Technological innovation, informed by the understanding of psychic dynamics, advanced in remarkable ways. Devices were developed to safely amplify and regulate psychic energy, enabling new forms of communication, healing, and artistic expression. Virtual reality and augmented reality experiences became tools for empathy building and conflict resolution, allowing users to inhabit others' perspectives and navigate complex social landscapes with greater awareness. Governance adapted to the challenges of managing a society in flux, emphasizing transparency, inclusivity, and adaptability. Decision-making processes incorporated diverse voices, balancing quantitative data with qualitative insights drawn from community experiences. Ethical frameworks evolved to address novel dilemmas posed by psychic phenomena, ensuring that progress did not come at the expense of dignity or freedom. Despite these advancements, tensions persisted. The unpredictable nature of psychic phenomena sometimes led to misunderstandings, fear, and social fragmentation. Extremist groups exploited these fears, advocating isolationism or authoritarian control to contain the unknown. The community responded with renewed commitment to dialogue, education, and healing, recognizing that exclusion and repression only deepen divides. The personal journeys of individuals reflected the community's broader evolution. Many grappled with questions of identity, purpose, and meaning, navigating the interplay of inner transformation and external change. Stories of struggle, loss, and redemption intertwined with tales of discovery, joy, and transcendence, weaving a rich tapestry of human experience. Healing practices flourished, blending ancient wisdom with contemporary science. Rituals honoring the cycles of nature and the mysteries of consciousness provided grounding and connection amid uncertainty. Community gatherings celebrated resilience and creativity, reinforcing a shared sense of belonging and hope. The relationship with the entity itself evolved from adversarial to dialogical. Through collective intention and individual courage, people learned to engage with the psychic presence, seeking not domination but understanding. Moments of communion revealed insights about the nature of reality, the interdependence of all things, and the possibilities inherent in embracing paradox. This transformative engagement fostered a new narrative, one that transcended victimhood and fear to affirm agency and potential. The entity's influence became a symbol of the unknown as a wellspring of growth rather than a source of dread. The community's identity shifted toward one of explorers and co-creators, committed to navigating the mysteries of existence with integrity and compassion. The journey was far from over. Challenges remained, unexpected shifts, emergent threats, and the ongoing task of balancing individuality with collective harmony. Yet, the community faced the future equipped with a deeper wisdom and a profound sense of interconnectedness. In this unfolding story, the legacy of the entity was both a caution and an inspiration. It reminded humanity that the unknown can be both terrifying and beautiful, a place where fear and hope coexist and where transformation is always possible. The community's experience stood as a testament to the power of resilience, openness, and love to transcend even the most profound disruptions. As the chapter closed on this epoch, the spirit of inquiry and compassion endured, lighting the path forward. The community embraced the mystery not as an enemy to be conquered but as a partner in the eternal dance of creation, inviting all who dared to step into the unknown to join in the adventure of becoming. Thank you for watching this deep dive into one of the most baffling true crime mysteries that challenged everything we thought we knew about reality. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a chilling tale from Mr. Nights. Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. We love hearing what you think might really be going on behind the scenes. Good night, and sweet dreams from Mr. Nights.